It's January in the 21st year of the king's rule, and this massive city is absolutely buzzing with life under a pale sky. This story actually kicks off way out in the woods at a lonely cabin, where a 15-year-old kid faced a memory so humiliating he could never forget. Inside that hut, Noine stood right in front of his father, Earl Kivafelt, who finally spoke up and said it's been a long time. Noine almost called him Dad, but he caught himself and switched to the formal title, Your Excellency, Lord Kivafelt. The Earl's face twisted with hate as he spat out that he only fed Noine for 15 years to save face. But now that this gross chore was finally over, Noine could only let out a silent, agonizing scream. His anger completely vanished, leaving him feeling totally empty as his dad's final words echoed in his mind. But he knew today was the last time he'd ever have to look at. The Earl played the nice guy, saying that since Noine was his own flesh and blood, he couldn't just kick him out onto the streets with absolutely nothing. Before Noine leaves, the Earl hands him a scroll as a final gift and explains that his family was given a secret piece of land by the royals long ago that's tied to the... While he reads, his dad offers to pay for the place himself, acting totally smug and asking if that's finally enough for him. He finally saw the catch. That fancy title was a total scam because the map showed his land was just a lonely forest on the edge of Lodberg, and his dad was actually using it. It all finally clicked. This selfish jerk was forcing him to risk his life just to stay alive. And as he realized his own father was ready to trash his entire future, one single thought burned. You could see the pure, cold hatred burning in his eyes. He's been hated since the second he was born, all because he's the first son of Earl Maximilian Kivafeld, a high-ranking noble ruling the southern part of the Lodberg Kingdom. His dad totally hated him because of his mom, a gorgeous servant at the mansion who the Earl just used for fun. But after she got pregnant and leaked the truth to everyone, the Earl was... This scandal totally trashed his dad's reputation since everyone mocked him for having a kid before he even got married. So he made the mom a concubine to fix the drama and let her live a super fancy life. His mom was living her best life, but Noine was totally ignored and didn't get a single ounce of love from anyone. Everything went from bad to worse when he turned 9 years old. After she died, the Earl didn't have the guts to kill his own kid, and since his wife refused to live with him, a servant told the boy he was being locked away in tea. The kid just whispered, "I get it." And for the next 6 years, he was stuck in that house like a bird in a cage until he finally grew up. He remembered being trapped in that house after his mom died, with nothing but a massive pile of books to show him what the real world was actually like. Growing up totally alone, that massive house drilled one messed up lesson into his head. He should be ashamed just for being alive. Stuck in that tiny room, he spent all his time staring through the bars, wishing he could be as free as the birds flying outside. The poor guy just broke down crying, his face soaked in tears from a lifetime of being completely alone. He's only this broken because he spent his entire life trapped. His dad literally stole 15 years of his childhood by locking him away in a house in the middle of nowhere. Years later, he finally thinks he's free, but his dad, Earl Kibafel, traps him in a new cage by giving him a title and land in the middle of nowhere. He looked right at his dad's cold, blank face and made a silent promise to himself, "I'm doing this." He was totally getting his revenge, so just you wait, because that promise was basically him declaring war in his head. With a secret plan locked away, he played it cool and accepted the deal, but he had one final request. He wanted to buy one of the Earl's slaves to take with him. He got his wish, and once they reached his new territory, Matilda saw how tired Master Noine looked and told him it was definitely time for a break. She was totally right, and he was already gasping for air since he hadn't moved like this in forever. He panted and apologized for gassing out, but Matilda told him it was fine and offered some tea, which he accepted with a big smile, insisting he was going to walk on his own 2 feet no matter what. They stopped for a second as he looked out over the massive sea of trees, declaring the Bezel Forest his new territory and the first day of his big comeback, even telling Matilda with a grin that deep in the middle of the wild woods, he realized his dad basically dumped him there to die. After being locked up for years, his body was way too weak, and he knew that without his puppet, they survived. And it's all thanks to a tradition in the Lodberg Kingdom where every 10-year-old, from princes to peasants, gets a blessing at the Holy Church. But magic it's a total blessing. But even for people with magic, most can only do basic chores like making fire or water, while actual powerful wizards are super rare, and there are only a few. He's one of those super rare puppet wizards who carves magic circuits into golems to control them. And you can tell right away his puppets are insanely strong as they effortlessly... But there's a massive catch because golems are actually super slow and clunky, making them suck at fighting or even just moving around. Getting one to move as smooth as a human, puppet magic was basically seen as a total dud, and even though it beat having no powers at all, everyone agreed it was bottom tier compared to the cool stuff. Noine was feeling super proud because after grinding his magic every single day for 5 years, all that hard work was finally starting to pay off. While Matilda poured him some tea, she told him she was super glad he was a puppet wizard because his skills were way more useful than just basic fire or water tricks. She was totally right and had the proof to back it up, since his golems were the ones dragging their heavy supply cart and smashing a path through the thick forest. Deep in the thick woods, she remembered how he spent his last bit of cash on that golem because he knew it was a smart move, and she told him straight up that controlling a giant like that, he's got some serious talent, and tells Matilda he's finally finished after practicing a ton while he was stuck at home, all while his golems stay busy pulling weeds nearby. Now that the spot is cleared, he points to a massive tent in the wild and tells her that's where they're going to be staying. For now, his ego totally vanishes as he looks down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He grumbles about how ridiculous this whole thing is, the big shot lord of this land. Now, Matilda sees him totally losing it and looks him right in the eye, reminding him that he's actually got insane talent. Even as a wanted fugitive, she starts dreaming big, claiming this empty wasteland will turn into a town and eventually a massive city. She imagines a massive city where Master Noin lives in a huge mansion and everyone treats him like a total legend. He snaps back to reality, and she promises him that this is only the very first step of their massive plan. Her total faith in him really hits deep, making him look back at the 2.5 months since he got kicked out of the mansion when everything was just cold and empty. And he agrees with Matilda that this is where their new story finally kicks off. It's finally starting, and his face turns stone cold as a wicked smile creeps across his lips, warning the whole world to watch closely while he gets his revenge. Over on the east side of Alquist territory in Connates Viz County sits the capital city of Lethich, where the stone streets are always packed with people and cool wooden buildings. Check out this massive, spotless building towering over the city. It's got so many floors it's clearly the most popular tavern around. The tavern is buzzing with gossip, and one guy asks his buddy if he's heard about the noble trying to build on the west side of Bezel Forest, though he thinks it's a total ice. The rumors spread through the room as everyone starts asking why they even need a big boss when there's nobody left to rule. Nearby, a guy with long light hair turns to his buddies with a creepy smile and asks if they heard that, pointing out that a noble with no backup is the perfect target since nobody would care if he died, making him the ultimate choice for their revenge. Far away from all the city drama, Noine the noble stands in a fresh field checking his plans while massive golems wreck the forest behind him. You can totally see their hard work paying off now that they've cleared a massive field, leaving nothing but tree stumps behind for the next big project. He's just chilling on a log tapping a stick, realizing a whole month has already flown by with this world's weird 6-day weeks. And when he asks Matilda what to do next, he immediately takes it back and apologizes for rambling since he's totally clueless. Even though it's been years and he's still a bit unsure, he can't help but notice how far they've come. The forest is being cleared out super fast. He rubs his chin and gets totally serious, realizing that even after all this work, he can't call this a real territory until he actually gets some citizens to live there. He's wandering through the forest, totally stressing over his empty pockets because even though his dad gave him 300,000 Reboros, buying Matilda left him with only 2. He started crunching the numbers again. He'd already dropped a ton of cash on farming gear, magic tools to fix the land, and a high-end tent. It was a must-have. He was totally stuck in his head, and Matilda and a rabbit-eared girl looked on worriedly as he let out a massive, frustrated sigh. Matilda saw Master Noin was totally stressed out, so she told her friend they should brew some tea to help him chill. Suddenly, the bushes rustled and everyone froze as the other animal-eared girl screamed a warning to Master Noin while Matilda jumped in to protect her, leaving Noin staring in total shock. He stood there frozen, trying to wrap his head around the danger while his friends got ready for a fight right behind him. Matilda's training kicked in as she screamed, "It's an ambush!" spotting the attack from the right and leaping away to carry the other girl to safety. Once his friends were finally safe, his shock turned into pure rage as he whipped around to face the hidden enemy, a glowing magic circle instantly popping up in his hand. Suddenly, cloaked figures start creeping out of the woods, and as the little girl screams to find out who they are, Matilda quickly counts 2 on the right, 1 on the left. As the guy charges straight at him, Noin lets his power loose and summons a massive stone golem that slams its arm down to stop the attacker dead in his tracks. His golem slams into the ambushers with insane speed, And one of the attackers screams in total shock because he's never seen a golem move that fast as his buddy gets sent flying by a massive strike. Even with the golem's massive power, these guys are dodging every hit like it's a joke. And he suddenly realizes that if these were just regular bandits, they'd be crushed. They're all locking onto him, and his eyes go wide as he realizes these guys are way too scary to handle. He starts to freak out, thinking he can't keep this up, but his heart stops when the mercenary leader suddenly appears right behind him. He's right behind him, and his jaw drops in total shock because he can't believe how fast and strong this guy really is. While things stay stealthy, Matilda is stuck in a brutal fight, grunting as she blocks a massive hit from another attacker. This massive, beefy guy is totally shocked by her insane speed, but Matilda ignores his trash talk because she's only focused on taking him down fast so she can get back to Master Noise. Suddenly, a sharp voice rips through the noise of the fight and screams, That's enough!" Matilda jumps back with a gasp, her eyes instantly snapping away from whatever she was focused on. She freezes in horror when she sees the mercenary leader holding Noin hostage with a blade pressed right against his throat. The leader screams at her, calling her out as the servant and giving her. He looks over the wreckage of the battle and admits to his prisoner that the fight was actually a huge pain, while Matilda stands there looking completely stunned, and one of the mercs is tied up. He turns his focus back to the guy in his grip, keeping the blade pressed against Noin's neck while admitting the golems are surprisingly fast, and warns him not to even think about moving. They're totally cornered and nobody's even thinking about the odds anymore. With 5 enemies left, trying to control his golems would leave him and Matilda wide open, and Slit knows his hostage is totally trapped, so he yells at his goons, Pence and Radley, to tie Matilda up and take her out of the fight. As the mercenaries close in, Matilda's brain is working overtime, and she realizes the long-haired guy is the boss she has to handle to survive, making her wonder if she can even talk her. Noin breaks the silence to ask if they're just after a quick payday, but the mercenary leader looks down at him and reveals that while they need the cash, the real reason they're here is Noin himself. He narrows his eyes and asks with total disgust, "Wait, aren't you in a—" The accusation hits the noble like a truck, and Noin's eyes go wide with total horror. Right in the middle of the city ruins and trashed golems, the mercenary leader finally shows how twisted he really is, admitting that his only motive is a dark voice in his head that just— He explains exactly where all that hate comes from, telling how he used to lead a mercenary squad he loved like family until some nobles got them all wiped out, and now He keeps the story going, explaining how a noble from the southeast hired his mercenary crew earlier this year to team up with the local guards and fight the Paris Kingdom as things were starting to heat up. The fighting was over, and on that field where a sword was shoved into the dirt like a headstone, they were all finally gone. They were totally left behind. He explains that the noble set them up from the start, using them as human shields just to save his own soldiers. Tons of their friends were wiped out right then and there. They kept running until they were totally broke and had to start stealing just to survive. And now he's blaming the nobles for every bit of their pain. That's why he's decided to wipe out every single noble. He stands over his prisoner and makes it clear. There's zero room for talking. He doesn't know who know. He's hungry for revenge and wants to survive, but he realizes this mercenary is totally locked in and won't listen to a single word he says. He's talking, but then he suddenly yells for the guy to stop, admitting the mercenary might not get his revenge. But his question is way more important. He needs the truth right now, so he stares them down and asks if the rich guy from the southeast who used them like pawns was actually Earl Maxim. The mercenary leader stops dead in his tracks, his eyes popping out in total shock the second he hears that name. He says the name and completely flips out, screaming, "Why you?" because he can't wrap his head around how they actually found out. He's totally stunned at first, but then he just loses it, laughing his head off and clutching his stomach like it's the funniest joke ever while shouting that he finally gets it. He stands up straight, making Yuri totally blow a fuse as she demands to know what's so funny. But with a super creepy grin, the young noble says he's just genuinely hyped to have He finally tracks them down and starts acting like a total psycho, calling their meeting a crazy coincidence and thanking them for talking smack about that guy. Even calling He thinks back to when he was stuck under house arrest, relying totally on his loyal servant Matilda to tell him everything that was happening in the world while he dealt with his trashy father. Her reports finally clued him in on the war, where his dad was hiring a bunch of cheap mercenaries instead of sending his own actual army. Back in the present, he shouts that his dad totally played those soldiers and then tossed them aside, calling Maximilian Kibuffelt a greedy, heartless monster who only cares about himself. He's showing zero respect, and the hateful way he exposes their past secrets leaves Yuri totally speechless and completely shook. Everyone is losing their minds, but then he drops a massive bombshell. He's actually Maximilian Kibifeld's son. He admits he never thought he'd run into them here, but once the story wraps up, the whole vibe shifts, and a much calmer Yuri admits he actually gets the guy's situation, joking about how small the world really is. He explains how the world works and then drops a wild idea, asking if they'd be down to stop hunting every noble they see and try a totally different plan instead. He tried to wrap his head around the new plan, asking if they were really ditching the hit on Noin to go after Earl Kibefelt instead, while the mercenary leader stood there totally confused. Since nothing was undone, Noine's face twisted into a total psycho look as he yelled that his dad has to stay alive for his revenge to actually count. He's totally fine, which just leaves the mercenaries even more confused, so Yuri gets serious and demands to know what this crazy plan is all about. Noine looked the mercenary boss right in the eye and finally dropped his insane demand. He wanted the whole squad to be He asked them to become his citizens, and everyone was totally floored. Yuri and I thought he was just joking, but Noin was dead serious. This was his biggest dream after a whole life of. Now that he was finally free from his father, he revealed his massive plan to take back everything he lost, grab all the power his dad never had, and build this land into his own perfect. Everyone in town totally loved him, but his real plan for payback was finally showing as he bragged that once he pulled this off, news of his win would spread everywhere. He was obsessed with getting back at his dad, grinning like a total psycho as he pictured the look on the old man's face when he realized the secret kid he tried to kill was. He was totally losing it, his eyes glowing as he imagined his dad living in constant terror that his secret affair with a maid would finally be exposed and slowly poison his entire life. As Noine's dark vision about the Earl ended, the mercenary leader stood there frozen with his hand up, totally speechless and struggling to process all that insane mental trauma. Noin looks super confident as he reaches out his hand for one final epic speech, telling the mercenaries that just living a great life here is the ultimate way to make Maximilian's life a total nightmare. No one wasn't born this twisted, but right from the start, he was denied any love and banned from even speaking to his own mom, while the maids constantly told him he should. Growing up in such a messed up place meant he never really had a shot at being normal. His dad publicly shamed him for being illiterate, and then banned tutors for a whole year, making the kid finally realize just how trapped his life had actually been. He just couldn't wrap his head around it. He hadn't even done anything wrong. But still, everyone treated him like he was total garbage. That's when he realized his whole life flipped upside down once he got thrown in jail. That's where he met a beastman slave named Matilda, who was forced to be his caretaker. She was in rough. From that moment on, his whole world was just about her, and he finally felt what it was like to be loved for the first time ever when she put that flower crown on his head. Being loved felt like a total rush, and he was completely hooked. He started craving even more respect and admiration from everyone. He swore he'd never let this feeling go, wanting a lifetime of happiness to finally make up for all the pain he'd suffered. He decided right then that he wouldn't be a bully like his dad who ruled with fear, and instead, he'd become a leader everyone actually loved by treating them right, swearing that, now that he's all grown up, he walks right up to a group of mercenaries by a campfire and tells them he wants them to join his kingdom, no matter what kind of trouble they've caused in the past. After asking who they are, a 35-year-old guy with long, light hair steps forward and introduces himself as Yuri, the former leader of the Crimson Sword Squad. Once the boss wraps up, his crew steps forward, starting with a buff-bearded veteran named Radley and an eye-patch-wearing girl named Pence, who's basically the boss's right hand. The intros kept rolling as Yuri, this long-haired dude going by Bart, explained he uses his face to charm people for info, right before a girl named Mai stepped up and claimed she was Yuri's woman. He listened to everyone and confirmed their names were Yuri, Pence, Radley, Mai, and Bart, then introduced himself and Matilda before asking why a group that showed up to kill him suddenly wanted to live in his kingdom. He spoke with total confidence, telling them that joining him was way better than just getting petty revenge on a noble, and he promised they'd finally have a bond built on real love and respect. He promised them a way to get back everything Earl Kivefeld took, offering a fresh start and the perfect chance to ruin his father's happiness forever. Val gripped his hands together and made a dead serious promise. He swore to be the best leader ever, to care for everyone in his land, and to make their dreams come true. Looking, Yuri thought hard about the risks, realizing it'd be way easier to just ditch this total psycho and never look back. He looked away for a second and realized that after all the pain his crew went through, following someone like no one to finally find some happiness actually sounded like a solid plan. That hope really hit the mercenaries hard, making them all wonder if they could actually trust this young noble and finally start a brand new, happy life. Things got real fast when they realized that even if he stayed solo, his dad had likely hired a massive army to hunt them all down. Matilda is totally losing it, but he stays chill and tells her his cheapskate dad won't waste money searching this far out for long, which actually helps her stop panicking. He turns his focus back to the mercenary leader Yuri as no one makes the offer again, asking him to join the revenge mission so he can finally live a happy life while still getting his payback. Before Yuri can even open his mouth, she cuts him off, calling him boss as she ditches her jacket and asks to just wrap this whole thing up. She keeps going, saying she doesn't care which noble they hunt for her revenge because she's just sick of watching their friends die, but she'll follow Yuri's lead. That's all there is to it. Mike stops to think and realizes this guy has already been ditched by everyone, so their plans won't even faze him. Killing him is... She raises her voice to remind Yuri and Radley that they've all lost so much they had no choice but to stick together. She points out they all want the same thing and are secretly tired of watching their friends suffer. Then she leaves the big choice to Yuri, telling him that whatever he decides is where the real fun begins. Yuri leads the whole Crimson Sword squad, including Mai, Pence, and Radley, and without bowing to anyone, he says they'll be the ultimate sword and shield to protect him. Swearing there, totally choked up, he looks at his new followers and thanks them, swearing right then and there to protect his loyal crew forever. With a satisfied grin, he looks at Matilda and the Crimson Sword mercenaries and announces that they're officially part of his territory now. He asks Matilda if she's mad, but she looks him right in the eye and says she's only angry at the mercenaries, not him. No one explains that they're all just victims of his father's cruelty like he is, so he's choosing to protect them instead of ditching them, and Matilda silently nods and he says he took in a bunch more people just yesterday and is heading out to buy them food, which makes Matilda super hyped and happy to hear the news. A bit later, our guy hits up a shop to grab some supplies from the lady in charge. He asks for salt, barley, pickles, and a bunch of fresh veggies that won't go. While he waits, the shopkeeper is rushing all over the place, yelling for Marco to stock the shelves and telling Anna to get some tea for Lord No. This is the Crupple Trading Company, a grocery store for regular people near Retvik's Westgate. And Matilda's been here so many times that she's actually tight with the owner, Eliza. This girl, Anna, walks up and serves him some tea, and when he thanks her and asks her name, she gets all shy and says yeah. He realizes that working in the shop means she can read and do math, and even though Anna says she only knows enough for basic inventory, Nuun is totally blown away by her skills. Jana points out that bookkeeping takes some serious math skills. Then she looks at Nolan all nervous and asks if he's the guy building that massive bezel force out west. He explains how he traveled all the way from Kivefelt County in the south to become the Lord of the Archvist Barony, and Anna is totally shocked since she's never even left the city of Retwev. He notices she's totally hooked and asks if she wants to see the world outside, making Anna blush as she reveals her dad was actually a traveling merchant. Just as she starts wishing she could see more, a guy with long light hair pops up at the door looking for Lord Noah. The guy announces the cart is fully loaded with all the supplies. Shocked by his insane speed, the hero introduces him to the shopkeeper Eliza as his newest follower from just yesterday. He flashes a charming smile and introduces himself as Bart, telling Eliza he was just a lost refugee until Lord Nolan saved him and brought him into the Archivist lands. Eliza is totally shaken by his story, and with a trembling hand, she tells Bart he's incredibly lucky that such a nice lord would even look at commoners like them. Bart agrees, looks totally grateful, and swears that from now on, he'll give his all to serve his lord and pay back this massive favor. He turns to leave, but Eliza suddenly shouts for him to stay right where he is. She hands him a small box of fancy raisins as a gift to celebrate Lord Nolan taking in the new group and to show she respects everything Bart and his crew have been through. No one watches the whole thing and tells Bart to just accept her help and give it everything he's got. Anna, the shop assistant, was replaying the whole scene in her head and realized that a handsome guy who's also this good with people is a seriously lethal combo. Just as the group started to head out, she stood with Eliza and Marco at the shop door, waving goodbye and telling them to visit again soon. A little while later, the noisy supply cart rattled through the woods as Noah and his crew headed straight for his new territory. As they travel, Matilda's face turns stone cold as she explains the attack, especially how Yuri tried to end him for absolutely no reason, and she swears she'll never forgive her. He didn't even care and acted totally clueless, saying they had every right to be mad and even offering to chop off his own finger to settle the score. Switching gears, he asked the crew how Bart's show in town went, and Radley confirmed it was a total disaster. Wallace and Yuri stepped up, asking if they were really going to buy soap and towels for everyone since that stuff is usually only for rich people, while Mike bragged about how they picked the perfect manager. He told Yuri it was totally fine, explaining that if they're going to survive living in tents in the woods, they have to keep themselves and their clothes in good shape. He got a super serious look on his face and explained his goal. He wanted to be a leader who actually deserved their loyalty, so he promised to make sure every single one of them was taken care of. He finished strong, saying that making sure everyone lived a good life was the secret to making his new land blow up and succeed. He's doing great, standing in a sunny clearing with his new squad when a mercenary asks if this is the big payout he promised, but he stays silent and just tells everyone it's. Her face turns to stone as she coldly announces she's taking Yuri's left pinky as punishment, and you can tell things just got way too real. He tells her to hold up, and right as she's about to finish the job, he screams for her to stop because he's done with the violence, reminding her that Yuri. Everything stops and the vibe gets super intense as Yuri stays on one knee, gripping his sword, because nobody can actually stand up to this mercenary. He switches things up and reminds everyone how Yuri insulted Matilda, so he decides the real punishment is letting Matilda kick Yuri since she's way more important to him than any stupid rules. Matilda ignores everyone else, locks eyes with Yuri, and agrees to the deal, but then a massive bang rings out right behind her. Yuri gets sent flying from that massive kick, and with the score finally settled, the leader announces the punishments are over and rallies the crew to start building his new territory. Now that they've reached the area, he tells the group they'll head to Retvik tomorrow for supplies, but since it's already late, they'll just have to rough it and sleep outside tonight. Yuri suggests they just camp out, but no one shuts that down fast because he refuses to let his friends sleep in the dirt. He brings up a book he read about being a good leader, saying, he breaks it down simply. You can't expect people to work hard if they're hungry and cold. So by giving them a good life first, their work gets way better, and he finally rolls into Retoivik, the capital of the Kenneth's Viscount Sea, with a massive stone golem dragging his cart behind him. And as he stands in the busy street, Mai steps up and offers to handle the shopping, bragging that she's a total pro at getting the best deals. Everyone's cool with that, so the leader starts handing out jobs, following the plan, he and Matilda pull up to the Krebel Trading Company, where the receptionist Eliza greets him with a huge smile and he says a friendly hello right back. Heading back from Lethvik, no one hits the road with his new red new, the Crimson Sword Mercs, and two massive golems hauling all their heavy gear. He stops dead in his tracks, and just as Mai asks what's up, a pack of growling wolf monsters called kobolds leaps out of the bushes. But Mai's, with that tiny threat out of the way, he looks at his new crew with total confidence and tells them that everything is different now. Because with a squad this strong, they're going. He keeps hyping up his big plans for the future and tells everyone to just imagine what they could build. Starting with a small village that grows into a town and eventually becomes a massive city. His speech gets the whole squad hyped, so they all team up and swear to stick together. A week flies by, and now they're finally putting in the work to build a brand new future. After a brutal week of work, the mercenaries are totally wrecked. And now Yuri, Radley, and Pence are just slumped over their logs and tools with absolutely nothing left in the tank. Radley groans in total pain because his back is absolutely killing him. And Nolan points out that this kind of hard work is a whole different beast than just fighting. Everyone else is totally on the same page. Pence admits that every single chore is brand new to her, and she's nowhere near used to it yet. Radley adds that nobody in you. While the group is complaining, Yuri and Matilda show up to tell everyone they did an awesome job. Yuri says he feels bad for making such talented people do farm work, but Radley reminds him they're the only ones left to do it. But the real work is happening deep in the woods, where two golems are ripping up massive trees to clear the way for the new village. They worked like absolute beasts under no one's gaze, using their insane strength to prep the ground for new farms. While the golems cleared out new land, Matilda was busy working hard on the fields they'd already finished. Meanwhile, she took over the cooking to make sure everyone stayed strong and full of energy. Everyone was grinding hard together, and when Pence came over to ask what she was planting, she told him that with the Lord and his crew helping out, nobody could really complain, and she was honestly, nobody else was hyped as she got ready to drop the answer with a total show-off move, making Rap burst out laughing. He showed off a massive barrel with a huge grin and told everyone they were finally planting potatoes. The mercs stared at the weird plants totally clueless, never realizing these were actually southern crops that people in this kingdom only used for decoration. He held one up and revealed he'd actually learned all about them from a dusty old book he found back at the Count's place. The book said these plants were basically a cheat code because they grow super fast and are packed with nutrients. And down south, people even call them the crop that saves the whole nation. He felt so lucky that he actually scored a whole barrel of seed potatoes from a merchant down by the pool. Down at the port, he's hanging out with a bald mercenary who's shocked that after years of fighting, he's back to farming. But the guy is actually pretty happy because all this new food means they're finally going to grow. He just smiles and corrects the guy, saying they aren't just workers since they're actually farming their own land now. The whole squad of mercenaries goes dead silent and stares at him in total confusion. But since he's just standing there holding a potato, nobody even asks what's wrong. But he's totally wrong. That bald mercenary makes a huge scene, doubting what no one says because he thinks they're just regular farmers working for some lord. But no one shuts him down, and he reminds them of his original plan while pointing out the specific field plots for Mai, Yuri, and Pence, leaving the mercenaries completely floored because they thought they were just splitting up the chores. Everyone totally forgot that the mercenaries insisted on doing all the heavy lifting themselves, telling the lord to just kick back and watch because their boss would absolutely flip out if he caught them letting their master work while they were supposed to be protecting him. He realizes his big dreams go way beyond just turning these guys into farmers, because he wants to live the high life as their lord, and to pull that off, he's got to make the... He looks straight at the main group of mercenaries, knowing these are the exact people he needs to join his side. The idea of becoming retainers totally catches us off guard, so the bald guy, the girl with the ribbon, and I just stare at each other in complete shock. The room goes dead silent as the leader skips the formalities to announce that Yuri is his new right-hand man, since his time leading mercenaries proves he's the only one who can keep the boss from messing everything up. He takes the job right away and starts telling everyone who's in charge now, picking Pence as his second in command because her mercenary experience makes her the perfect fit. Since Yuri keeps the orders coming, making Radley the heavy hitter in charge of defending their home, putting Bart on duty for anything happening outside the walls, and finally telling Mai, his oldest ally, that it's time to go wild with her special ability. With Matilda right by his side, no one watches the group take their new spots with a satisfied grin. He tells the crew that after seeing them work all week, he knows they're smart. He swears he's sticking it out until the end, and his mix of total trust and a promise of a future fight leaves those tough mercenaries too stunned to even know what to do next. Everything goes dead silent as it finally hits them that they've gone from being wandering mercenaries to actual landowners. And they all agree it's time to head back. As Noan and Matilda head off, Yuri and the bald warrior watch them go and swear to be the most loyal and hardworking followers of the law. Wait, I need to make sure I don't use R if I can finish it. Fast forward a few weeks and the town is finally the cash is finally flowing and the town is growing fast. So looking out from the balcony, he's grinning with pride while leading the construction and trade with total confidence. Back in Chester, the new squad shows they've got serious skills when Yuri takes down a massive wolf monster with one clean swing. Watching from a rock, no one is blown away that they wipe the floor with those things in under 30 seconds, but Yuri just cleans his blade and acts like it was no big deal. While the group cleans up the mess, I tell Matilda he's crazy lucky to have such beastly warriors on his side, like even God is rooting for his revenge. And though Radley, their carriage rolls through the mountains without a single person announcing their back, but then he looks over and his jaw drops because Yuri, the mercenary leader, is suddenly completely bald. And while everyone's too scared to ask what happened, the girl with the giant ribbon just watches with a look that says she knows exactly what went down. He smirks and explains that since his face is on every wanted poster, he had to ditch the red hair to blend in, and once he grows a beard, nobody will ever guess he's the legendary mercenary from the South. The girl with the ribbon teases Mai about her boyfriend's wild new look, but Mai just blushes and thinks he looks totally fire no matter what. She just keeps on teasing him, telling a super flustered Yuri that he's clearly loved by everyone, and Mai even says she totally digs his new look. They finally reach the spot, and as Yuri looks over the massive empty field, he points out how deserted it is, making no one panic and stammer that it's only been him, Matilda, and the golem living there until now. Matilda quickly jumps in to defend their hard work, explaining that even though it looks empty, they're actually doing great with high-end tents, a nearby river, and magic tools for daily life. It's been almost 4 months since Lord Nolan was kicked out of his family's mansion and sent to survive in the wild frontier. In that short time, he's been absolutely crushing. Even with all their wins, things are getting super tense. One of the mercenaries finally snaps, standing by a stone-faced Matilda to confront the Lord face to face. She looks him right. Mai steps up to Matilda, looking super frustrated and worried, and asks her point blank if she actually hates them since she won't even look her in the eye, calling her out for being a total brick wall just like she was back at the domain. She keeps talking, admitting their first meeting was a total disaster, and saying she's really sorry, while I swear she's actually trying to change even as I remember those mercenaries standing over a fallen body. This talk sparks a memory of a young boy kneeling by a wounded Matilda near a small house, gently promising her that she's finally safe. Inside the house, the boy asks for her name while she's kneeling on the floor, and she shyly tells him she's Matilda, calling him young master. He shuts her down instantly and says his name is Noan, telling her to ditch the young master title and just call him Lord No. Matilda is totally shocked by how nice he's being, and when he gives her a head pat, she literally drops to the floor and begs for punishment because she just can't handle the gentle treatment. A little while later, he walks into the room with a tray of food and a huge smile, asking her to come eat with him. He finds her about to eat on the floor like she's totally used to being a servant, but he stops her immediately and insists she sit at the table with him instead. While they're eating, he notices her food looks totally gross and promises that starting tomorrow, she's getting the exact same top-tier meals he does. Once they're done eating, he shows up with a fresh towel and soap, giving her a big smile and telling her it's her turn to take a bath. He looks down at the messy girl and tells her straight up she's way too dirty to get in bed, while Matilda just stares back looking totally confused and a little bit scared. He hands her a towel and tells her to get a good soak before they fix her wounds, but a shaking Matilda thinks he's just disgusted by her, so she quietly heads to the pieta. Walking away, she's totally confused by his logic and just figures he doesn't want a gross slave trashing his room. She finds an insanely fancy bath filled with steaming water and rose petals, and she's totally blown away by such an awesome surprise. The second she's done, she drops straight to the floor and starts apologizing like crazy for taking so long, literally begging to be punished. He just stares down at her, looking totally chill and completely unbothered. He crouches down for a gentle head pat, promising he's not like those other guys who'd hurt her and telling her she can take all the time she needs in the bath. He promises he'll never hurt her and tells her to just ask for whatever she wants, since his only goal is to take really good care of her. He gets even sweeter and pats the spot next to him, inviting Matilda to come crash on the bed right there with him. Tucked under the blankets next to her, he finally opens up and admits that he's always looked up to kind people and just wanted to be that person for someone else. He kept talking softly about how he just wanted her to have a normal life with good food, clean clothes, and a warm bath while Matilda started mumbling as she drifted off to sleep. Even as she started to drift off, his words were so incredibly kind that she just couldn't hold it back, and tears of pure relief started pouring down her bruised face. As the memory fades, she realizes that ever since that day, Lord Nolan has been nothing but kind, giving her back her pride, teaching her about the world, and most importantly, showing her what it actually. That crazy loyalty was driving everything she said right now. But the mercenary lady wasn't feeling it and stepped right up to challenge her, asking what Matilda could possibly do to make them trust her She told August straight up that she didn't hate them. She just had no clue how to handle anyone but Lord Noah since he was the only person she'd ever actually taught. Her whole life was all about him, and she didn't care if they were in a forest, a wasteland, or a crazy war zone. As long as she was by his side, she's literally ready to go to hell, and the way she said it proves she's ride or die for life. The mercenary's face softened as she crossed her arms, finally realizing that Matilda had been so alone that this guy was the only thing on her mind. She admitted that if they're both happy with the setup, she'll stay out of it, but she warned Matilda that her social anxiety is a real problem and told her she needs to. The mercenary explained that with Lord Nohan in charge, the land is going to blow up with new people. So Matilda, as his very first follower, seriously needs to learn how to actually talk. Matilda knew the mercenary was 100% right, but she was totally lost on how she was even supposed to act around us. The mercenary just reached out his hand and offered them an eye. She had a sudden idea and asked to be friends so Matilda could practice her social skills on her, which totally left Matilda speechless. She was totally stunned, and that one sweet move made her remember the time he begged her to stay with him. Matilda was more fired up than ever, so she agreed to train and asked the mercenary to look out for her. They shook hands to seal their new bond, and the mercenary announced it was finally time. One line out. If I provide 4 lines without line breaks, it's just one long line. But the prompt says 1 line in equals 1 line out. Preserve the maw. Looking at that gold coin, she remembered the harsh truth. While the north is chill with beastkin, things get way more dangerous the further south you travel. Off she went to the southeast where her life as a slave started at just 5 years old, bought by the rich Khanate family who owned a massive and scary. Her life back then was a total nightmare, and she suddenly remembered her mistress slapping her across the face and screaming because she couldn't even handle a simple task. It was supposed to be a simple task, but she can't stop remembering the non-stop abuse where they'd hit her for no reason and then beat her even more for crying while they screamed. After dealing with all that for so long, she finally just gave up on life. And even though she was still breathing, her heart was totally empty inside. She was straight up dead, trapped in that lifeless state for 10 whole years. She was drowning in despair, but the second she turned 15, she got slammed to the ground and given a brand new face. A maid from the main house dropped Matilda's new orders. She'd be hauling meals to the annex every single day. Matilda was now the go-to person for everything, so the master laid down the law, forcing her to stay in the annex from now on, so she just lay there on the dirt floor and quietly agreed. With her face pressed into the dirt, she finally gave up, realizing her life was now in this boy's hands. He turned around to hit her, but instead of a punch, he just gave her a super gentle head pat. By early June, 3 months after the start of cultivation, all their hard work finally paid off. Matilda stood over Noan while he was kneeling and yelled out that they finally succeeded. She told, the whole crew sat down for a massive feast to celebrate, raising their glasses for a big toast, and just as Noan took a bite of the new harvest, Mai leaned across the table, dying to know what he thought. He realized the food was actually fire, and after stuffing his face, he finally understood why it was such a classic. He even started blushing because he was enjoying the flavor so much. The other mercenaries were totally sketched out and complained about eating the mystery food, while Yuri just looked bored and only agreed because their boss said it was cool. Seeing their leader dig in, everyone at the table grabs a handful of the boiled veggies, hyped to finally taste the crop that's supposed to save their land. They stopped doubting it and started inhaling the food, already wanting seconds or thirds, while Yuri loved the cool texture, and I just grinned because it tasted amazing. While they're eating, Matilda realizes this crop would taste way better if they did more than just boil it. And the mercenary girl with the ribbon totally agrees that they could cook it a million different ways. Suddenly, a wild idea pops into his head. He starts picturing himself slicing it thin and frying it up, thinking it would be the ultimate snack to have with a drink. He gave the mercenaries a soft smile and told them he was just thinking about his lonely days back at the manor, realizing he never imagined he'd be sitting with a crew like this, and Mai shut him down hard, looking him dead in the eye and telling him he was settling for way too little if he actually wanted to make it big. She warns everyone not to get too happy yet because this is nothing compared to the revenge she wants, and while Pence is stunned, Mike agrees that their army is only going to keep growing. Mai shuts down the mushy talk and reminds everyone they've got massive fields to harvest and desperately need more help, while later that night under the full moon, no one realizes that getting more people is their biggest priority. Now we're jumping over to the Lord's Manor in Lethvik, the capital city of the Konitz Viscount. Inside the county, an aide tells Lord Arnold Konitz that a group of refugees is begging to enter the city. And when he hears it's 31 people who lost their village the Lord is in a total bind, because Vic is way out on the edge of the kingdom, making it the last hope for refugees. But while letting everyone in might ruin the peace, he slumps at his desk, staring at the mountain of papers and letting out a huge sigh because he has no clue what to do next. His face gets totally serious, as a wild plan finally starts coming together. In this form, he's only got one thing on his mind. Can he actually use this to make his plan work? Back in No Man's Land, the vibe is totally different as Pence holds up a massive potato she just dug up, her eyes literally glowing with pure hype. She shows it off to everyone while Matilda starts celebrating for no reason. He grabs the veggie, looking like he's about to cry from pure joy. He can't believe it. Meanwhile, over in Konitz, Lord Arnold is going over reports and thinking about the new noble who just moved into the forest next door. Since clearing those woods is a massive job, Arnold comes up with, Konitz smirks at his aide and names his target, Knight Noan Alquist, declaring that since they're neighbors now, he's going to use him for everything he's worth. Back in No Man's Land, the crew checks out their first potato haul, but one of them thinks these veggies look seriously creepy. That's just creepy. So she puffs out her cheeks and snaps at the invisible critic, insisting her round little potatoes are actually adorable. The bald mercenary is totally shocked, asking if you can really plant one piece and get 10 back. Mike confirms it, explaining that in the South this crop is famous for saving entire nations. She tells Matilda that in some places people actually use these things just for decoration. Meanwhile, nobody else is looking at a potato and seeing its true power. He compares it to wheat, which only gives The bald mercenary realizes how insane this is and asks Yuri if he even knows how much those potatoes are worth. Mai gets hyped and thinks they should sell them to other lands, but Yuri shuts her down immediately, making it clear they aren't selling a single one. Not just yet. His eyes sharpen and his face goes stone cold as he finally realizes the insane power they're hiding deep down. As he looks up at the flags waving over their new home, one big idea finally clicks in his head. His mind is spinning because he realizes that a crop this easy to grow means a tiny group of farmers can feed a massive army, giving him way more soldiers than any of his rivals. He stood there with dirt still on his hands from the harvest, listening closely as they explained their massive advantage. They were the only ones growing potatoes for food, and that big smile confirmed they were totally in control. He held up a single potato with a devious look and laid out the master plan. They'd ramp up farming at home first, knowing that smart nobles see these as vital war supplies. So, with the plan finally going their way, the meeting ended and the quiet night sky filled up with stars. Under the glowing stars, a pot bubbled over the campfire as everyone wondered if the potatoes were actually safe to eat. But the only advice they got was to carve out the eyes and cook them through before grabbing a plate. With the food finally ready, the whole squad sat down for a massive feast. And to celebrate their very first harvest, he raised his glass for a toast with a huge smile on his face. While the squad gears up to leave, Yuri asks about the history of the Condensed domain. But no one admits he only met the guy once for a quick hello before starting his work, and meanwhile, Lord Conan is totally loving his own sneaky plan because he basically dumped those refugees on Lord Alquist to get free workers without any of the drama. And he's smirking because a bit later, he's riding solo in a carriage, looking totally lost in thought as he heads toward the Conet's place. He shows up and Lord Conet's greets him, apologizing for the sudden invite but saying he's just glad to see him safe, so no one gives the Lord a polite thank you for the thumb. They sit down for a serious meeting where Lord Conet's asks how the land is coming along, and no one, with his crew right behind him, says he's just happy the Lord is. He explains that the great weather let them move at their own speed, but Conan realizes it must take a massive crew to clear a forest this big. The Lord's eyes narrow as he asks straight up if anyone is actually capable of helping him out. He just smiles and hides the fact that they're low on people, saying they're only making it because the crew he's got is actually super talented. That's exactly what Lord Conates was waiting for, so he leans in and tells Alquist he's got a deal he's definitely gonna love. Konitz broke down exactly how he could help, revealing that 31 refugees had just shown up at his place, and most of them were just kids. He was totally locked in, thinking hard about what this new info actually meant for him. The young lord immediately caught the hint that Konitz wanted him to take in the refugees, and the old man was super impressed by how fast he figured it out. Lord Conan leaned over his desk and pointed out that nobody actually wanted these refugees for work, remembering that he was only 15 when he got kicked out himself. Deep down, Konitz just saw him as a clueless kid he could easily control, making this whole deal feel like a total joke. No one flashed a confident smirk, agreeing that the deal looked like a total win for both him and Lord Conan. That super cheerful agreement totally caught the old lord off guard, leaving him completely stunned and speechless. Everyone knew taking in a massive crowd of refugees would be a total headache for the locals, but Lord Konitz just said he actually needed more people anyway, so it was a perfect win-win for everyone. He looked totally serious and told them he was 100% down for the offer. Once he heard the official yes, Lord Konitz leaned back totally satisfied, knowing this deal was a perfect win for both of them. He was hyped that the deal worked out for both of them and hoped they could keep this good energy going from now on. He headed out and nobody even cared about the deal anymore, but he was positive Lord Konit had already dug up all his secrets and the history of those old Kivifa lands. He figured Konitz finally connected the dots to his dad's massive scandals, especially the secret that he was actually a servant's kid born before the Earl even got married, and Matilda was getting really... Back in his study, Lord Konitz swirled his drink and realized he'd totally misjudged Noah. He used to think the kid was just another one of the Count's embarrassing mistakes, but now he's seeing that Noah is actually way more capable than his dad. Noah's feeling pretty good too, knowing this deal is a massive win for both of them. Konitz realized this kid totally saw through him and knew he was running low on test subjects, but instead of acting like he was doing a massive favor, the guy just made it sound like a win. He noticed that even with a massive advantage, Alquist never tried to act like he was the boss, because he knew exactly where he stood. Staring at that document with no name or crest, Konitz realized he'd totally misjudged no one Alquist. Looking up, the stress of the day was hitting everyone else like a massive wave, leaving them totally wiped out. He felt this way because his cool act had totally shattered, and he looked completely stunned as he finally admitted he was actually freaking out. He's totally losing it as he grabs Matilda, yelling about how scary it was and making her look at his shaking knees, but she just tells him he's acting like a total baby. He lets out a massive sigh of relief and slumps into his seat, and even though Matilda says he looked totally chill, nobody wants to admit he's just a master at hiding his true. He's super relieved, thanking her and asking for a drink now that the deal is a success, especially since getting 31 new people is a total lifesaver when they. With everything finally sorted out, they're ordered to head back to the base and get ready for the new guys, and the whole crowd roars back in agreement. A little while later, he stands before the exhausted travelers, holds up his family banner, and introduces himself as Lord Alquist, the ruler of these lands, welcoming them all to his domain. He scans his territory and spots a totally worn-out guy, asking if he's the one in charge, and the man confirms he's Edgar, the heir to the village chief. Everyone feels for the guy and doesn't want to pressure him, but Edgar steps up and decides to tell them exactly what happened. He agrees and starts telling his story about how they lived in a border town until war ruined everything, starting with the Lord's mansion getting hit and then their own village being next. With Lethvik, Edgar's face is twisted in pain as he explains that while some villages helped families with kids, most people didn't even survive the start of that long, brutal trip. He points to the tiny group of survivors and reminds them they started with over 50 people, but now this is all that's left. He drops the heavy news that his dad and the elders stayed behind to fight so they could escape, and since they're probably all dead, they've got nothing left to go back to. Everything was gone. And as Edgar finished his story, the heavy sadness of the refugees hit him hard. He realized this wasn't just about getting more workers because these people were, no one was totally dedicated to helping out, but his crew warned him that being a nice guy comes with a massive target on his back. While they were chilling in a carriage, Yuri pointed out that he didn't care about the rumors anymore, and with his voice shaking, he yelled to the shocked refugees that he just wanted them to be happy, begging them to start over in his land. He reached out to the crowd and promised that from today on, they'd all be chasing happiness together in his brand new world. The refugees rushed forward and swarmed Lord Noan, shouting his name as their sadness turned into pure relief. They thanked him over and over, admitting they thought they were goners and swearing he was totally caught off guard by all that kindness and just froze up like a statue. So when Matilda asked if he was okay, he was low-key screaming no on the inside. He was totally speechless, but Matilda was already crying her eyes out, thanking him for being there and leaving no one completely overwhelmed. He was totally losing it because all the thank yous and Matilda's crying were way too much, and while he was dying of embarrassment inside, Matilda secretly loved seeing him get so emotional. Two of his mercenaries are watching from the sidelines and can't help but laugh. The bald warrior jokes that their boss always talks about wanting to be loved, but he gets totally shy that high into the air it went, while the bald warrior just watched the party with a knowing smirk on his face. Seeing that look on his face, a girl in a military uniform smiles at how happy he is, but there's still one word she just can't stop thinking about. He's trapped in his own thoughts because nobody realizes how much danger he's actually in, knowing that if he spills the secret of his birth, it'll expose his dad's scandal. At House Kibefeld, the lady in uniform explains that even a big shot like Viscount Konitz wants to avoid dumb fights with other nobles, so she's sure he won't make a. Even with all those enemies around, nobody looks like they're ready to give up. He's convinced that if he can just make it as a powerful noble, he'll finally be. Leaving his dad behind, we see the massive stone walls of Letvik as someone says it's finally time to finish their shopping list. Just as Noan and Matilda head toward their goal, that same lady in the uniform suddenly blocks their path, looking super serious as she calls him Lord Alquist and says Lord Arnold Konitz ordered them to be taken to the manor right away. Inside the manor, nobody ever gets a face-to-face meeting with the powerful Lord Arnold Konitz, and his stare is seriously intense. Nate announces that Lord Alquist has arrived, and even though nobody goes to meet him, his whole crew, Matilda and the Crimson Sword mercenaries, are all standing by to see what happens next. Inside the Anna chamber, Konitz is looking over his intel and remembers that Alquist showed up 3 months ago with just one servant, and since he still has less than 10 people on his, the refugees are totally losing it with joy. And one guy even shouts that he never thought they'd own land again after what happened to their old village. But Noah and Alquist just smile and confirm that all 31 of them are getting their own farms, while Matilda points out to the bald mercenary just how happy everyone is. Meanwhile, Lord Conan's Lady Knight calls out to the refugee leader Edgar, and he just gives her a quick yes in return. She keeps grilling him, asking if the chief's smart son actually gets why they were given this land, And a shocked Edgar swears he'll work his hardest to lead the others just like she wants. He bows low to accept the job. Then the knight turns to a shocked Matilda and promises to work her tail off to become her personal servant. The bald mercenary tells Matilda that nobody's really doing anything special, because while any rich heir could build a village, letting the refugees do the work means they actually own the land and won't just... He realizes giving land to people you can't trust is just asking for a massive fight, and he's confused why anyone would even think about taking that risk. Now we see how genius this plan really is, because to these new folks, getting land from no one is the best thing that's ever happened to them, turning their desperate situation into a future. Matilda finally gets it. Giving them land is the only way to keep them happy, and she realizes he's the only one actually thinking about the future to win their loyalty. The bald mercenary is totally blown away by how no one predicted everything and calls him a straight-up genius, but he almost says something risky about their boss before just cutting himself off with a never mind. He switches gears and points out how she's finally talking to the group instead of being a loner, and Matilda just gives a quiet nod. The night girl from the Viscount's squad tells the bald mercenary she's only there because my advice was the best move, even though she's still a rookie, and the big guy just... Inside the command tent, no one sits with his arms crossed, stressing over their money and what's next for his land. He counts up his cash, and even with his dad's severance and the money from hunting, it's still nowhere near enough, and he drops the brutal truth on his crew. Winter is coming in 6 months, and since they're too broke to build real houses, everyone's stuck freezing in flimsy tents, leaving Matilda and the girl terrified they'll all die in the cold. Result, all on one line. It's absolutely freezing out there. Things look totally hopeless, but he isn't backing down for a second. He tells everyone they're going. He starts zoning out, imagining a future where his people finally have soft beds, hot baths, and nice big houses, and his crew is honestly touched seeing how much he really cares about their happiness. Suddenly, a female knight pops up behind him and scares him half to death, asking if he actually plans on finishing all this work in only 6 months. Noah drops to one knee and rolls out a map, telling everyone he's got a foolproof plan to get the cash by tracking down a mineral vein in the Restio Mountains. This map shows us the whole layout of the land, with the Alquist territory tucked deep inside the Bezelgrave Forest way up in the northwest of the Rotobel Kingdom, while the massive... He breaks down the plan, explaining that the Restio Mountains up north are packed with minerals, and even if they don't know the exact spot yet, it's definitely their best shot. He gets his main crew together to kick off the plan, with the bald mercenary saying the mountains are only a half-day hike away, and the guy in the vest adding that all the new refugees. When the missions are assigned, a knight from Conan's squad asks if she's joining the search, since her golem would be a total beast in a fight. The bald mercenary shuts her down hard, saying Lord Nolan would just see her as dead weight on the mission, and the knight looks totally crushed by his words. Everything goes dark, and as she trips backward, nobody even reaches out to help her. He admits the mercenary has a point, but reminds everyone that her shopping spree already wasted enough time and her feet are probably still sore. She just squirms, totally embarrassed that he's calling her out like that. Then he gets a super serious look and says there's no way he's dumping the mess he started onto us. His determination actually wins the mercs over, so the guy in the vest laughs and says they should bring him along to see what he's really made of, while the bald guy just... But the very next day, the journey gets brutal, and deep in the woods, a totally exhausted guy just collapses while the female knight screams his name. An alarm blares, and after they carry him back, he's propped against a tree covered in bandages while Matilda fixes him up. She tells him to zip it, and the bald mercenary behind them is just face-palming, looking totally fed up. He stares at the ground in total shame, while Matilda apologizes for just being dead weight, and even though nobody says it, he's clearly in no shape to be a leader right now as that. The group stops, and one bald mercenary groans that since there's no road, they're stuck hiking through miles of forest before even reaching the crazy, dangerous mountains. He looks right at one of Lord Conan's girls and tells her that just by looking at them, it's obvious his mercenaries are the ones built for these mountains. So the Lord doesn't even need to break a sweat. He was being way too harsh, and his subordinate just looked down, her face totally clouded with disappointment and worry. Seeing how worried she looks, the mercenary kneels down by her log and softens his voice, making it clear he wasn't talking about Lord Nolan. He feels like he's just a burden, which makes her think back to how he was stuck in that tiny house until a few months ago. So she totally gets that it'll take... She realizes that being locked up actually let him focus entirely on his books, giving him a level of knowledge that's just insane for someone his age. Back in the present, the mercenary finally gets what she's thinking and admits that he and his crew are way too old to learn those kinds of skills, making her knowledge super rare. While that's happening, another group of mercs is figuring out their jobs, and Mai admits she can't fake being charming like Bart, but Radley says it's all about putting the tea. The bald mercenary keeps going with total confidence, explaining that seeing Lord Nohin lead from the front makes them all want to follow him. He says they trust their leader completely and asks her to finally put her faith in them too. He drops that bombshell and lets the silence hang, while his subordinate looks up with a face that says she finally gets what he's really up to. She looks totally frustrated, but she finally gives in and agrees to stay behind for this mission. She finally gives in, and as she starts the job, Matilda gives her a huge hug from behind because she's so hyped, but the girl is actually low-key miserable since she really wanted. Back at the site, Yuri and his mercenaries are scouting the rocky ground, and just as Yuri mentions he can use a little magic, one of his guys shouts out to him. Noah sits up and hears someone calling his name, asking Mai if she hears Yuri's voice in her head too, and he realizes this is actually the first time he's ever used this specific magic. After the attack, he switches gears to the real mission and asks if they finally found that weird rock formation. Yuri shouts that they finally found it, pointing to a bright blue patch on the cliff that he first thinks is a crystal, but then he realizes the actual rock is just naturally that color. Yuri's way off in the distance, but he uses his dialogue magic to hit up the team telepathically. He's no expert, but it gets the job done. While sharpening his blade, he breaks into a massive grin the second he gets the news, screaming, "I did it!" as the mercenary confirms the rock is real and asks for orders. So he's totally right, and he smacks his hands together in victory while picturing that blue lapis lazuli ore, shouting that this huge find is going to make their whole kingdom filthy rich. Looking back at his childhood, it's like his mom Violet never even existed, living like a ghost in the Kiva felt house while the main wife totally hated her. Even though she was surrounded by, he found shiny blue jewelry and super expensive paintings made from crushed gems, reminding him that his mom was totally obsessed with that specific blue stone. He burned every lesson she taught him into his brain, from how to spot the best items to how their price would absolutely skyrocket once they were turned into pigment. Back in the present, he presses a rough chunk of that stone to his face and smiles, thanking his mom as he realizes those painful days are now his most precious memories. He turns to the worried Matilda and Mai, says sorry for the scare, and flashes a big grin because this lapis lazuli just solved all their funding problems. He explains that the stone Yuri's team found is worth a regular person's entire yearly salary, leaving Mai and Matilda totally speechless. Even if the price changes later, Mai covers her mouth while her brain goes into overdrive, thinking about all the cool stuff they can buy with that massive pile of cash, like a 2-story house, a super soft bed. He breaks into a massive happy grin as he realizes she's totally right, and their dreams are finally about to get way bigger. He holds up a picture of a massive mansion to show off their new goal, and just like that, their brand new life outside those old walls is finally beginning. A bit later, Yuri reports back on the lapis lazuli deal with the Miles Trading Company, and Noah is all smiles as he flashes a peace sign and says they totally crushed it. He explained how he totally played Benedict by faking his first move, letting the merchant think he was just some broke noble acting tough so he could swoop in and take total control of the deal. The merchant thought the blue stone looked awesome, but since he didn't know its real value, he started overthinking the price of raw versus polished gems, which actually stopped him from trying to rip them off with a lowball offer. He just gives a cocky grin and shuts the merchant down, saying he's not there to buy. He's actually there to sell. Benedict's jaw drops when he realizes the guy actually has the lapis lazuli they were just talking about, and since he's the one in control now, they wrap up the deal super fast. After that, the whole deal went super smooth and he sold that rock for a massive pile of cash. He wasn't finished planning yet and told his friends that Viscount Konitz had already hooked him up with a mining technician. I was seriously questioning if letting the Viscount in on all their business was a smart move, but Matilda didn't care and backed her master's choice 100%. Matilda's hyped to find out where they're going next, but everyone stays quiet as they head to a pro-construction crew Benedict suggested to talk about building houses in the Alquist territory. He went inside and told the boss his big plan. He needed 13 houses built for regular families before winter hit, and he was even planning to build more later. To get it done fast, when they asked if that crazy deadline was possible, the boss got his cool back and promised that with enough help, they'd finish the whole thing early. He brought up one huge problem. The project needed a supervisor, and while he knew someone who was free, he seemed really nervous about picking them. He finally spills who the new supervisor is, and it turns out the guy is actually a beast man. Next, a jacked guy with dog ears and a big scar on his cheek steps out, and the boss introduces him as Dimitri. The foreman starts stuttering an apology, saying Dimitri is a total beast at his job but a nightmare to work with. But the boss shuts him down, saying he doesn't need a nice guy. The beast man turns to no one and asks if he can say a few words, wondering why no one is being so chill and respectful to a beast man like him. But no one shuts him down. Before he can say another word, Matilda steps up with a serious face and demands to speak, pointing out that the guy standing right behind him is actually a beast man slave, and the four of them are totally. She keeps telling Norman she's the ultimate servant who's always got her master's back. And after hearing that, Dimitri finally gets the vibe and takes the job, promising to, "It's time to get to work." Now that the deal is signed, the building finally starts. Beastmen are working hard on site, dragging massive materials around in the sun. Matilda watches the busy construction site and realizes things are super tense because the Beastmen workers are totally on edge around the locals, who aren't being friendly at all, proving that while the buildings are going up, these two groups are definitely not vibing. He starts thinking about the exact same thing Matilda was worried about, telling his crew that in a world where might makes right, the weak are always going to be scared or angry, so he's telling the truth. And it's obvious when you see these beast kids crammed in a cage, looking like their spirits are totally broken. Everything is totally broken, and while he's trying to figure out what to do, Mai looks him right in the eye and drops a bombshell. The only reason she isn't being hunted, Matilda shoots Edgar and the beast people a scary little smirk, warning them not to be rude or cheap with her guests since she's already told the whole world how kind they are. With everything finally settled, Edgar looks like he's about to have a total meltdown. But the only thing that matters is making sure the workers actually enjoy what they're doing. He stares up at the sky, totally lost in his head, just wishing he could find a way to make them all truly happy. He decides to make it happen and walks up to Dimitri with a basket of fresh bread, but the Beastman's supervisor gives him a major side-eye, demanding to know what he's really planning. He flashes a big smile and hands over a basket of snacks for the workers, making sure to tell them that the potato and barley bread is seriously good. Later, the workers are munching on their snacks and talking about how Lord Noan is basically a local celeb for feeding them every day. But while one guy is hyped about the fame, another. Dimitri isn't feeling the good vibes at all, and he snaps at Noan, asking if he really thinks he can just tame the beast people with food like they're common animals. He's getting super frustrated and yells that beast people have their pride no matter what anyone thinks. So since the crowd is dead silent, Dimitri just takes a massive, aggressive bite of his food. No hands him a piece of bread with a super serious look, telling him straight up that your race doesn't matter when you're putting in the work. His words hit like a ton of bricks, leaving the Beastman's boss Dimitri hunched over in silence while Mai watches him, still holding her food as the heavy vibe finally sinks in. Dimitri finally looks up, looking totally exhausted, and admits he lost, saying that even though he's a beast, he's letting the MC build the houses because he finally respects his skills. With everything finally settled, nobody even asks if Dimitri is happy, but he stands there with his arms crossed and says he's satisfied, declaring that the Alquist domain can finally start living like a while later, Mai and Matilda are looking over a cleared field when Mai gives her a sweet smile and tells her she's amazing, and Matilda just totally agrees. They look up at this massive brand new mansion as Matilda explains it's a fancy home fit for a total lord. Once you step inside, it's obvious someone lives here because there are baskets of fresh laundry just waiting to be worn. Finally clean. These new luxuries are a total game changer, and she feels like she's in heaven the second she hits the warm water while Matilda helps wash her back so they can finally enjoy some. Everything is finally peaceful, and she asks Matilda if she can even believe they were living in tents just 6 months ago. Their dreams are actually coming true. And while Matilda quietly agrees, she gives Lord Nolan a huge, heartfelt smile and swears she'll follow his dream anywhere. Then she turns to Matilda with a soft look to thank her for everything and tells her that he's totally in love with her. Their huge new mansion looks awesome under the stars, showing everyone they finally made it. But now, there's a new mystery on everyone's. Deep in the land of Retvik, we meet a girl named Anna reading under the moonlight as she tells us all about helping out at her family's shop. One of Lord Konitz's spies is watching from the shadows, noticing that Lord Nolan has been a regular for over 6 months. And while it used to be just him and Matilda, he's back at the shop. She sighs because she's never actually left Revik. And hearing these travel stories makes her desperate to finally see the world for herself instead of just reading about it. Her daydream gets totally wrecked when someone screams her name for help, making her jump out of her skin. She yells back a quick, "Yeah," but she can't stop staring as the sad truth hits her. She's stuck in this house in this town forever, and her whole life is Over at a brand new house, Mai thanks the bald mercenary for finishing their place first, but he just shrugs it off, saying he had to make sure she and the leader had a home before anyone else. He goes totally silent and gets a super serious look on his face, clearly worried about something to do with her. His thoughts are cut short when their leader suddenly pops up, and Mai shouts, "Yuri!" in shock as the bald mercenary turns to face them. He grabs the chance and drops to one knee right in front of Mai, looking her in the eyes with total focus as he finally asks her to marry him. Out of nowhere, he drops a proposal that leaves her totally speechless, and while her friends watch in shock, she can barely even get a word out. She's totally stunned, but her face turns bright red as he holds her cheeks, and she looks right past him to whisper, "Yes, Yuri, let's be happy together." The whole squad of mercenaries goes absolutely wild with excitement. Everyone starts shouting out wedding plans, dreaming of a massive ceremony and the biggest party ever for the happy couple. The bald guy starts teasing, but man, real life is way more brutal than that. Alquist is getting totally buried under a mountain of paperwork for his massive project, from mining lapis lazuli and managing piles of cash to directing golems, and he's honestly losing. All that pressure finally gets to him, and he just face plants onto his desk, totally wiped out. He forces himself to sit back up, looking totally exhausted but like he's still ready to fight. He's just about to drift off again when Matilda walks in, heads over to his desk, and softly calls his name. He snaps awake with a jump, and after Matilda says sorry for waking him, she offers some tea to help him relax, which he's way too tired to turn down. Just then, a young aide walks in with a report for Lord Noah, but Noah is still totally drained and tells him he'll deal with it later. Noah was totally buried in paperwork when an assistant walked up and told him he was working way too hard. The guy insisted he take a tea break because Bart and the rest of the crew were getting really concerned, but his head was already spinning with all the massive work he had to get done. Yuri wasn't helping at all with the mining stuff. The refugees were busy farming, and the old "You're stuck doing everything solo, and while getting some loyal followers to handle all this boring paperwork would be a total lifesaver, you just let the idea fade away." With that finished, a wild idea suddenly hit him, and his eyes lit up. It was time to start recruiting, and he knew the exact person from his past who would be perfect for the job. To get the job, he headed straight to the Clavel Trading Company in the Retvik territory, right in the middle of Viscount Konnitz's land. No one walks into the shop with Matilda and Yuri, and the owner gives them a huge welcome, calling Matilda Eliza, and telling Lord Noah it's been way too long since his last visit. He apologized for being gone, thanked her for the business, and then told her they had something serious to talk about, leaving Eliza super curious to hear more. With a nervous grin, he admitted his land was a total mess, and he desperately needed a pro to handle the paperwork, then asked Eliza if she knew anyone perfect for the job. Yuri finally saw the play. Nuwun's plan was to use Eliza's connections to find a pro manager who'd actually move out to his new territory. Eliza thought about his request and realized that skill was the only thing that actually mattered. Age, gender, and where you came from didn't mean a thing. Talent was everything. Eliza turns to Matilda with a worried look, apologizing because she can't think of anyone who fits what Lord Alquist needs. She explains that since anyone who can read and do math can easily find work, all the good people are already hired, and Matilda totally agrees. Eliza suddenly spins around to her assistant and asks if she knows anyone who's a pro at accounting, which totally catches Anna off guard and leaves her stuttering in shock. Matilda watches from the sidelines, breaking into a sweat as she feels the whole vibe of the room suddenly shift. Right nearby, someone is watching the whole thing go down with a totally blank look on their face. He looks at Matilda with a little smirk, admits he asked something totally random, and says his time is finally up. He tells them to leave and turns to walk away, but Anna stops him in his tracks, shouting, "Wait, Lord Noah!" as she rushes toward him. She steps right in his way with a super serious look and boldly asks if she can be the one to handle his move. Anna steps up to take the challenge, and everyone is totally stunned. Eliza's freaking out, demanding to know what's going on, but Anna just ignores her and tells her boss she's dead. Eliza tells Anna to pipe down and pulls her aside, getting dead serious as she warns her that this isn't some happy fairy tale or a cheesy song, asking if she actually gets how. Eliza ignores him and keeps going, telling Anna that Alquist is just a middle-of-nowhere village compared to the fancy Sea of Konitz, and she's totally falling for all the fake hype. Despite all the crazy rumors, Anna stands her ground against her boss with total determination because she knows this is her one big shot at a real life. After being stuck as a merchant's daughter, in just this once, her emotional begging actually hits home, so Eliza hides her face and lets out a huge defiant sigh. He lets out a defeated groan, and Anna's face totally lights up with hope as Eliza wipes a tear and finally gives in, saying that if Anna is this determined to go, she won't. She finally lets Anna go, but there's a huge catch. Anna has to get Lord Nolan's okay first. She tells her to just hear him out, and Anna is so hyped that she starts thanking her like crazy. While they're on the move, Matilda asks no one why he didn't talk to Anna before saying yes, but she can see he's actually pretty hyped about it. He admits he just smirks from his own zone, saying that your own willpower is the only thing that matters, and he's stoked that Anna is finally making this choice for herself. This is just the start, and he explains he's doing it all for Anna because after she was brave enough to sign up for the move, she deserves way more than just a roof over her head. He finishes his explanation with a confident smirk, claiming all of this is necessary to make everyone truly love him as their lord. A bit later, a voice asks what's wrong, and instead of playing it off, they realize their mission just got way hard. A few days later, Anna is looking totally wiped out, but she's not quitting as she walks up to the desk where the guy is basically buried under a mountain of paperwork. She drops a finished, Anna watched as everyone ignored her hard work, but his doubt turned into total shock when he saw her notes were actually perfect. He straight up admitted she did a way better job than he ever could, and Anna finally felt like she finally proved she belonged there, and her shy smile turned into a massive, confident grin. Nolan looked up from his paperwork, totally relieved, and told her he was so glad she showed up. Lord Nolan Alquist sits at the head of a massive table and officially kicks off the meeting with his top guys right by his side. First up is Yuri, the mining boss, who says they finished digging up all that lapis lazuli without any trouble, and now his team is asking to move in and start the real work. Right behind him is Pence, the guy in charge of keeping order, who says the city has been super chill lately. Radley, the patrol leader, totally agrees and says the whole area is quiet, since he's mostly just been breaking up small arguments. Then Edgar, the farm boss, steps up with next year's plan, declaring they're going to grow a massive amount of potatoes while showing off his notes for all the other crops too. Right after that, Bart, the head of foreign intel, steps up to give his report. He's been snooping around Retwick and found out they're building an army to wipe out. Next up is Anna, the team's money manager, who steps up with a huge grin to show off her food reports, promising everyone they've got more than enough supplies to survive the winter before asking no one to double-check next year's budget plan. He listens to the reports with a huge grin, and even though Dimitri and the Beastmen are asking for new houses, he's just hyped that business is booming. As the meeting rolls on and Matilda scribbles down notes, nobody even realizes how important these updates are until he asks the room for any final ideas. Matilda speaks up and tells Lord Nolan that since the neighborhood is growing so fast, it's finally time to give the place an official name. Everyone actually stops to think about her idea, especially since Bart says Alquist Residence is a total tongue-twister. And both Mai and Edgar agree they need a real name to make dealing with. Nguyen Alquist rubbed his chin while thinking it over, realizing his land was finally becoming a real domain, but he knew he couldn't just rush into picking a name. Matilda totally cut off his thoughts and stepped up, saying she'd love to help him pick a name since she was so hyped she already clapped twice. She holds up a sign and suggests naming the whole place Noina to honor Lord Nolan. You just stood there with your jaw on the floor, totally stunned by that crazy idea. While he stood there totally stunned, Matilda started going off about how Lord Alquist is the heart of their new home, and his name needs to be remembered forever as the town grows, insisting it was the best idea ever. Everyone started shouting for him to hold up while they debated the name, and even though some thought Matilda was being way too blunt, they all knew a legendary name would make the citizens absolutely love their. Yuri the Mercenary asked if anyone hated the idea, but another guy pointed out that lords naming towns after themselves is totally normal, just like the first Lord Retwick did back in the day. He was low-key freaking out because the whole idea was just super cringe. It made him look like a total narcissist chasing a legacy he never even wanted, and he definitely wasn't trying to. He was squirming like crazy from embarrassment, while his older crew totally loved the chance to mess with their young boss. A few days later in the capital city of Retwick, Lord Arnold is chilling in his mansion and asking his assistant for the latest update on that exiled alchemist. He sits across from his subordinate with a stone-cold face, asking why she's really there, and even though he says he has news for her, he's secretly on high alert because he knows this isn't just some random visit. She turns bright red and explains she's there to announce their territory's official name, nervously showing off a sign reads called Noina while stuttering out the title, Lordship Noina. He stays totally calm and asks if that's really the only reason she's there, and she looks away, admitting she's actually super embarrassed by the whole thing. We jump back to a flashback where this creepy bald mercenary puts his hands on a crying person's head and starts apologizing to his boss. Everyone in the land shares this one powerful memory. They remember how Lord Nolan saved them when they were at rock bottom, giving them a fresh start and a reason to keep going. They were, back in the present, the subordinate explains that the retainers really pushed for that name, remembering how totally embarrassed Noan looked. Lord Conan just smirks, thinking Noan's reaction. Name's smirk gets even wider because he loves messing with people, and his subordinate totally loses it, screaming that he's just making fun of her. She's totally fuming when her light-haired coworker pops up with a big smile to check on the report, but she just brushes her off and says it's fine while the main. Still blushing like crazy, she turns to leave and tells her partner to hurry up so they can get back to Nolan and see if the party's already being set up. She was totally right, and now we see Lordship Noina Plaza in mid-December, packed with people and festive banners for the biggest celebration in all of Rydberg. The whole kingdom is decked out in festival banners with massive feasts everywhere for people to dig into, and she notices that it's not just the city partying, but every single village has set up its eye. Next, everyone looks over at Yuri, the bald mercenary, as Mai shouts that he looks awesome in his suit and everyone totally agrees he cleaned up well. Yuri just smiles and fixes his tie, mentioning he's standing right next to his bride, a fellow mercenary who looks stunning in her wedding dress with dark roses in her hair, while flower petals rain down on them during this epic celebration. The duo. The whole crowd goes totally wild, and Matilda is super hyped as everyone starts screaming their congratulations for everything is ready for the wedding, and high above the party, the festival banners are still dancing in the wind. Suddenly, the wind starts whipping around like crazy. Matilda suddenly walks over with a huge smile, telling the bride she looks totally gorgeous in that dress, and the bride just gives a quick reply. She says thanks with a smile, but her mind flashes back to the start of the year when she never could have imagined becoming a bride with a real home, and she pays him, but feeling like nobody is actually happy for them, a question pops into her head, and she seriously asks Matilda if she can strike a pose. She looks her straight in the face and asks with a totally steady voice, "Matilda, aren't you going to marry Lord?" The bride can see they're totally in love, so she tells Matilda to quit being a servant and just ask to be the Lord's real wife. Matilda's face gets totally serious as she explains that her situation is actually her own choice, and she was the one who asked Lord Noan to let her. To prove she's actually his slave, she pulls back her hair to reveal a round crest branded on her neck, explaining that she's a beast person, and this mark can never be removed. This status is weighing her down like heavy chains, and she's sure that if she doesn't marry Lord Noah, she'll just be a total burden while he's trying to rule his own. She calls him Noble Lord, and gets real about how cruel their world is, where beast people are treated like garbage, and the consequences for an ex-slave getting married would be a total nightmare. The bride feels totally guilty and says sorry for her rude comment, but Matilda tells her that everything she's said so far is just the surface-level reason for what's really going on. She finally makes her choice and reveals the truth. She actually wants to be his servant because serving him is the only time she's ever felt truly happy and at peace. Standing right there, she remembers him promising that even though a lord is supposed to marry a noble girl, he'd keep Matilda by his side forever. Because of that promise, she's totally fine not being his whole world, as long as she gets to keep her special spot where she can support him and feel his love forever. With her whole life story finally out there, she stands quietly by the bride, and they share a look while watching the chaos unfold. As Matilda's words sink in, the mercenary bride starts picturing her old squad smiling back at her. A girl with short dark hair, another with reddish hair, and a guy in a vest, all just laughing and sharing a moment together. She felt that bond, then looked back at the woman, checking out how Matilda was keeping her cool. Matilda had this super peaceful smile on her face and her eyes were totally sparkling with a quiet joy. Seeing her so peaceful, the bride finally realized that Matilda was actually, for real, happy with her life, and it wasn't just some fake act. This feeling was for real. So she said out loud that even though their bond was pretty weird, she actually loved it and wouldn't let anyone ruin Matilda's happiness while they lived their peaceful lives together. They're doing it all for the people they love. And as time skips forward to the year 221, the seasons shift and the winter snow finally starts melting off the mountain. High up near the mountain peaks, a mysterious hooded guy treks through the fresh trees just as spring is finally about to hit. In the middle of a busy market, a guy with tiny horns is slumped over a crate of fruit looking totally stressed, because he knows that no matter how hard you try to make the world perfect, someone is always going to show up and ruin the peace. He grips that dark fruit and gives a creepy smile, thinking about how people can be so totally weird and make zero sense. Out of nowhere, a hand slams onto his shoulder, and one of Lord Conan's female guards stares him down with wide eyes, demanding to see exactly what he just swiped. He snatched up 3 dark, shiny apples. The thief looks up with a super guilty face, apologizing and admitting he just couldn't resist the urge, even though he knew it was wrong. But the officer shuts him down and says stealing is... He's totally desperate and explains his name is Vindal, a guy who moved here 2 weeks ago and was so hungry, he let his survival instincts turn into total greed. Vendel tries to give the apples back, but the officer stops for a second and tells the shocked, rabbit-eared clerk that she's actually going to pay for them herself. The shop clerk tells Vindal that in this land, if you work, you eat, and Shiri promises him he doesn't have to steal just to survive. As the officials head out, Konitz, the long-haired aide, looks back at the guy on his knees and warns him he better watch his step next time. He nervously walks up to his boss to drop the daily report, explaining that it's all about the thief Vendel, while his coworker listens in with a huge excited look on his face. The aide keeps listing off all the drama Vendel's been causing, like how he steals water, cuts in line, picks fights with everyone, and even tries to take their land. But there's one huge problem that Lord Noah seriously needs to know about. At the same time, Lord Noah and Alquist hear from another worker that Vendel seemed like a total shy loner before he moved, making Noah grit his teeth and wonder if the guy was just faking it the whole time. She admits things got way too obvious to ignore, so she warned Vindal that one more screw-up would bring the Lord's judgment, even though she had no clue he was actually stealing. While the aide is giving his report, the mercenary leader Bart bursts in, calls the female officer Pants, and then bows to Lord Noah. Bart doesn't waste any time and demands to know what's going on, mentioning he heard about a huge fight between refugees that Pence should have handled. And when he asks if Vendel is... Meanwhile, in the next room, a stone-faced girl finishes her report, saying she already warned Vindal that the Lord is coming for him next time, and her boss just gives a quick nod. After getting the word, Bart and Pence show up in the village square with another mercenary to corner Vendel, and Bart just gives him a cold look, saying it's been way too long. Vindal glares up from the dirt, insisting to Pence that he's innocent because the land he took was just sitting there empty and unused. Pence still isn't sold, but then a girl with a bruised face and tears in her eyes steps up to tell her story. She explains that when she tried to stop him, Noah and Alquist are just standing there thinking while his subordinate watches, and Noah is trying to figure out how to fix this mess without breaking the kingdom's laws, because he refuses to be a T. Vindal is standing right there looking all mean, and he's the exact reason our hero is so stressed out. The girl next to him is shaking like crazy while Bart just watches with a super sarcasm. This is a total mess, so he stops to think it over. Vindal's excuses are super weak, but he hasn't done anything majorly illegal yet and pushing him to. After thinking it over, he finally makes his choice, looks them right in the eye, and says, "All right, it's time for me to pass judgment." He looks down at Vindal on the ground and delivers the final verdict, telling him that even if he didn't hurt anyone directly, he still caused a massive mess, and since he keeps causing trouble, Vindal gets busted for trespassing and starting a fight, so now the king is going to punish him personally. He keeps explaining his side of things to the guy, telling Vindal that even though he has to protect him as his subject, he also has a duty to keep everyone else in the territory safe. The verdict is in and the beating begins, with no one looming over Vendal's bruised back, warning him to stop causing trouble if he wants to stay safe. And through gritted, with the job done, he turns to the kneeling victims and says he's sorry, admitting it's his fault they were so scared, leaving the women totally shocked that a big-shot lord would even apologize as he walks away. He gives his guy more orders, telling him to get Vendel a doctor so he doesn't end up with scars, move his farm away from the others, and keep him under constant mind. For now, he just really hoped this would be the push Vendel needed to finally fix his life. But later that night, things got dark when Vendel pinned a girl with beast ears to the ground, holding a blade to her throat and snarling at her to shut her mouth, and he held her hostage with a scythe, totally fuming and complaining that he was sick of everyone being so loud all the time. He was totally fed up, and with a crazy look in his eyes, he shouted that he'd treat her like a beast slave since that's how he was truly treated. But before he can even react, a massive hit from the side sends him flying, knocking him right away from his cat. One of Lord Conan's soldiers stood over him, snapping that she wasn't about to let him lose his cool over a beast slave, especially since he was making a total fool of himself, right? She told Lord Noan that her vibe was totally different now, and she even put Pence on lookout just in case. But her real focus was on Vindal since she knew he was bound to. Lord Noan looked down at Vindal on his knees with a cold stare and told him he was done waiting for him to fix his act because he couldn't put everyone else in. Vindal stared out at the massive wilderness, thinking it was totally insane that he got kicked out for such a tiny mistake. He turned back to the guards and started complaining that they were totally overreacting over some beast man slave. All he wanted was a quiet place to live, but now the Lord was kicking him out, and he asked if they even understood his side of the story. While they're dragging him into the woods, Lord No One admits that kicking him out was a tough call, even though he looks totally stone-faced. He says he just wants the guy to... He's got a total poker face until he finally cracks a nasty grin, muttering that as soon as he gets out of there, he's going to tell everyone that Lord Alquist, and he keeps screaming his head off, calling the Lord a total creep who preys on bee slaves, kicks people out for no reason, and treats everyone like a joke. He calls the crowd idiots for... She's absolutely fuming, clenching her gloved hand into a tight fist as she finally makes her choice. She moves like a total blur and strikes, slamming her fist into Vendel's head so hard his skull just completely shatters. With her bloody fist still clenched, she realizes that kicking him out was the right move because, as one of her lord's people, she really just wanted him to be happy. She thinks if you're kicked out, you're not one of them anymore, and her only mission is to protect her lord's people from every single danger, including the threat. With blood splattered all over her face and a terrifying look in her eyes, she gives them one last ice-cold goodbye. In Vindal, the quiet forest is suddenly ripped apart by the sounds of a massive fight. She drops to her knees and starts puking as the weight of what she did finally hits her, but Matilda rushes over to comfort her and says she's sorry, knowing this was the girl's very first kill. Meanwhile, Alquist is totally stuck in his head, replaying the past and wondering why Vendel never loved him back or what big mistake he could have possibly made. He figures he just doesn't get Vendel because he grew up totally cut off from the world, but Matilda snaps him out of his head, telling him not to sweat it since you can find idiots in... While no one thinks about what's next, his soldier is still on her knees shaking with guilt. But no one is totally locked in. He knows being a lord means he'll have to kill to protect his people, and he's sure he'll get used to it pretty fast. One of Lord Conan's assistants is totally drowning in paperwork as she realizes their territory is in major trouble. They've got all these fancy new buildings but zero staff to run them, and her assistant walks over and asks why she's so bored, mentioning that Lord Nolan has actually been pretty chill since the Ventera mess. But she just shuts him down and says things aren't that simple. She faceplants onto her desk in a total meltdown, whining that if the world is really full of good people, then Lord No One shouldn't have to deal with this disaster alone, while she looks up and finally admits it. They can't keep dragging Ventera into their mess forever. Her head is spinning because everything is falling apart. She has zero workers to build the land, she's buried under a mountain of paperwork, and they're desperate for more help to handle all the new people moving in. Suddenly, a wild idea hits her, and she sits straight up with a totally serious look, realizing there's only one way to get the work done. They have to buy people, and that means, in the city of Lordvelk, thinking like this is totally normal since slaves are everywhere, making up 20% of the kingdom with a pretty even split between humans and beast folk. Meanwhile, Nolan and Matilda are walking through town as he explains his plan to visit a slave trader to find smart assistants for him and Anna, along with some strong workers for the Miles Association. All his hard work leads to this one little girl with tired, hateful eyes who tells them she's been sold, calls them total creeps, and demands to go back to her parents in Nanogai. Facing all that rage, Noe just gives a confident smirk. But Matilda looks totally worried because she knows things are about to get way worse. The big boss of the Slave Trade Association breaks down the market and shows off their special merchandise, which are actually regular people from a war-torn area who only ended up here because their economy totally crashed. He looks right at Noan and Matilda, telling the crowd that even though deals like this are super rare, it's their big chance to sell some top-tier loot. And he asks if they, trapped in chains. One guy wonders what's going to happen and thinks dying might actually be better, since their world is way too messed up for anyone to escape a fate like this. Standing nearby, the girl nobody wanted watches the others and realizes they're just like her, mostly folks from the borderlands who were always just one bad day away from being sold. She keeps thinking about how messed up slavery is, and even though treating people like objects is cruel, it's the only thing keeping the poorest from starving, making it the one tiny spark of hope in her dark country. The trader shows her off, explaining she's a merchant's daughter sold to save her family from going broke, and he brags that she's a top-tier educated slave who even finished. She gives a sad wave as a tear rolls down her cheek, and after a quiet moment, she finally tells them her name is Christy. Later, inside a fancy room at the mansion, the door bursts open and Christy stands her ground, shouting at them to let her go right this second. Pence coolly asks if she's unhappy with her room, but Christy snaps back that she'd never be a slave to a broke lord. And even though the guards want to teach her a lesson, Matilda tells them to just let it slide for now. She still wasn't backing down, and she angrily demanded to know who else would even be in this middle-of-nowhere spot and what kind of boring office work he expected her to do. He tells her he needs an assistant for the paperwork since work in the countryside is brutal, but Matilda cuts in with a grin and says she'll handle any other services he needs, leaving Christy blushing like crazy at the suggestion. She went from embarrassed to totally furious, screaming that she's no servant while chucking books and papers at Matilda and telling her to get out so she could cool off. She finally backed down but was totally fuming, laughing at the thought of doing boring paperwork and asking if they were seriously trying to clown her. You could hear her screaming through the whole house, absolutely furious as she yelled that she wasn't even needed for something like this. Even after that massive freakout, Christy was still totally losing. She just kept ranting, fuming about why she had to listen to him when she was the one handling the merchant and all the money, and she totally refused to be anyone's servant. Christy finally lost her cool and snapped at Matilda, yelling that she was a total distraction and telling the beast girl to stop acting like they were friends. She starts screaming her head off about a loud noise she heard, pointing her finger and demanding answers because she's totally done with his greedy resort plans, and yells at him to just let go. As she starts freaking out, this guy with long light hair sitting nearby gives a nervous smile, introduces himself as the replacement named Yuri, and asks if he's being rude. He's just standing there with his arms crossed, acting all cool, while saying if Christy's acting like a monster, she needs to be put in her place, and Matilda's right next to him. He turns away with his mind totally made up. And even though his friends think Christy is the absolute worst choice, deep down they all know she's just like the rest. Back to Vendel. Meanwhile, Christy is sitting all by herself, just squeezing her teddy bear. The whole situation is finally starting to hit her hard. She was a noble girl, but her own. She thinks about how her old self would react to her now, realizing she's just desperately holding on to who she used to be. Things aren't like they used to be, and back in the other room, nobody is telling Matilda why he's doing this, but his big plan is to start a brand new life with Christy. He starts getting worried and realizes he's been way too mean, so he switches gears and mentions he's actually got a plan to talk things out. Christy slips away from Yuri and the others without anyone noticing, and now she's just sitting on the cold stairs crying, wondering why nobody has come to find her yet. As she waits to be saved, she flashes back to her rich life in the capital, where she lived in a massive mansion with tons of servants and held way more power than the lord of this new land. Back at the new house, she's totally losing it and clutching her head, wondering why no one has saved her yet, until a wild idea suddenly pops into her mind. But a second later, the stairs are totally empty and Christy has vanished, leaving nothing behind but a small pouch on the cold stone steps. Someone is sprinting through the pitch-black woods, their boots slamming into the dirt path and kicking up clouds of dust with every frantic step. Her face is a total mess of sweat and tears as she desperately forces herself to keep pushing forward. After sprinting through the dark, Christy stops to catch her breath and grips her stolen pouch, feeling like she actually pulled it off. She's sure those silver coins are enough to get her to the border so she can finally escape for good. She's dying to be free, staring at Lord Belk's slave seal on her neck, and knowing that once she crosses the border, she'll finally be able to turn back into her true self. Her tiny bit of hope is totally crushed when a massive wolf-like beast creeps out of the dark right behind her. It's straight-up blood, and she spins around, her eyes popping in total terror at the monster. She stares at it in total shock because she just wanted to escape, so why does she have to be so cursed? Talk about bad luck. The beast lunges and snaps its jaws right around her, and in that moment she can only think about her parents. She wonders why they never came to save. She's just a slave lying broken and bleeding on the forest floor. But through all that pain, she suddenly realizes something. No, wait, that's wrong. The people who actually enslaved her, a memory of her parents flashes back to a young Christy sobbing on the floor while Lord Arnold looks down at her, coldly thinking that by handing her over, he'll finally get exactly what he wants. She'd never see them again, and all she could think about were the cold words that ruined her life, calling her nothing but a tool. But since she was trained so well, she knew. The memory fades and she's snapped back to the nightmare, bleeding out on the ground. It finally hits her. No matter how loud she screams, there's nobody left to save her. And, even through the blinding pain, a voice cuts through the dark, coldly pointing out that after running away, she's ended up in a total mess. She was in a total nightmare, but then she looked up to see a dark-haired guy named Noel Alquist and his squad standing over her under the full moon. He kept it totally bien. She was begging for someone to save her, and when her bloody, hopeless eyes met his, he didn't look mean or sorry for her. He was just completely calm. She gave a knowing smirk as she finally made her choice, swearing her life to Lord Noan and begging him to take her in. After getting rescued, Christy wakes up in a real bed with her wounds all patched up. And looking out the window of this massive mansion, she thinks about her 15 years of being locked away as a... She was just dreaming of a place to call her own when Matilda, the rabbit-eared maid sitting by her bed, cut in to explain that Lord Nolan was behind all this, but it wasn't. She kept talking, admitting Christy had a rough life and ended up as a slave, but then she dropped a total bombshell. Lord Nolan actually has the same exact background. Matilda then told her that Christy, as Matilda breaks down this new world, we see him standing tall and totally locked in. She says he's always faced the truth and kept his eyes on the future, grinding every single day to build. He basically gave her a whole new life. And while Christy sat alone in her room, she wondered if she could really be like Master No One. She asked herself if it was okay to finally be happy. Nobody could turn her down once they saw her quiet determination. And hidden in the doorway, he just watched her with a knowing smirk that no one else even noticed. He just pulled off the rescue and later told his crew how relieved he was, even flashing a smile while saying, "It's awesome that people can actually turn their lives around." One of his everyone's resolve wavered? No, did not waver means stayed steady. No one's resolve did not waver is a triple negative, or he walked over to Christy's bed and promised her that together they were going to get the happiest revenge ever. While Bard plays the public face for Lord Noan, his subordinate handles all the real work behind the scenes. She's constantly smuggling goods into Konitz, acting as a secret messenger, and she heads over to the Revik Silverware Workshop, where the staff welcomes Bart-sama and tells her a new tool is ready, asking her to hang out in the lobby while he goes to grab the Master Craftsman. Inside, the Master Craftsman says sorry to Mai for the long wait, but she tells him it's totally fine. He mentions that since Lord Noan personally asked for this, his piece is totally ruined when a girl mercenary with a ribbon in her hair slams into the room, grabs the craftsman, and starts freaking out about where the master is while he just yells Sotani. The master she's looking for is actually Alquist, who's decked out in work gear and goggles as he excitedly rolls out a massive blueprint, shouting that he's changed the design again, and he bursts in all hyped up but immediately eats dirt, sending drinks flying everywhere while the master just stands there looking totally over. The other merc is absolutely fuming, leaning over the downed Noan and screaming at him for being such a total idiot. He jumps up and snaps that he's busy with a super important client, pointing right at me and calling his coworkers totally rude for interrupting. He turns back to Mai with a totally different vibe, apologizing for the noise and telling her to just ignore all the chaos. He stays calm for barely a second before spinning back to the Master Craftsman, shoving the blueprints in his face and shouting that he fixed the design while his bodyguard tries to drag him away. The Master Craftsman grabs him right away and starts losing his mind, yelling at him for crashing a business meeting and telling him to get out. But no one just calmly fixes his goggles because She watches the whole thing go down, calling the craftsman a total idiot and telling him to listen up, while wondering what was really going on in Nono's head before. The craftsman slinks off feeling super embarrassed, and Mai apologizes to Noan, calling him her big tough brother. But Noan's totally zoned out because his arm still hasn't. She focuses back on him and asks what's actually in those plans, remembering his promise of a weapon that'll change war forever as the heavy truth finally starts to sink in. Her voice echoes through the messy workshop as she calls out his crazy stories, telling him to get real since she's actually been on the battlefield and knows how serious this stuff is. He lunges forward and flashes the blueprints like they're the coolest thing ever. He's acting super hyper, asking her if she wants to see the designs. She's not impressed at all. Things get way more serious as Noan drops to his knees, pointing at his blueprints and begging the master to actually listen to his ideas instead of just glancing at the paper. But the old guy he shuts that down instantly, calling that way of thinking totally old school. He gets super fired up, arguing that being a genius creator has nothing to do with how old you are. She thinks it's hilarious, but she knows this plan won't fly with a guy as stubborn as the Master Crafts. Still, she rolls out the blueprints for a better look. And as she checks out the crazy details, she realizes she has to report this to Lord Noan immediately because these designs are going to be a massive help for the Viz territory. A week flies by and she finally reaches the craftsman's workshop. Inside the shop, she sits right across from the Master Craftsman while the guy she's looking for just hangs out by the door. She started by saying sorry for dropping in, but the Master Smith just brushed it off and told her she's always welcome. So, Mai cut to the chase and asked if he was working on something way cooler than just farm tools. She just grinned and said Bard told her about a cool blacksmith she wanted to meet, making the guy's jaw drop as he sputtered, asking why she'd ever want to talk to that total idiot. He was a total idiot. But even if he was just a dreamer, she still felt like meeting him was totally worth it. She kept talking, admitting she knew he was a dreamer but felt something special about him, which made the master craftsman panic and run to go get him since he couldn't say no. He came back alone, and after being forced to act polite, the super annoyed guy just introduced himself as Damien, a black. Once they were introduced, Mai asked the master craftsman to give them some space, and even though he argued at first, he finally backed off so Damien could speak his mind. As soon as they were alone, he told her straight up that he hates dealing with nobles, but she cut to the chase and revealed she knew about his game-changing secret weapon, offering him a spot. He completely lost his cool and his face turned bright red, so Mai cornered him with a huge grin and asked him to spill every single detail. He's so hyped he can barely get the words out, but he says yes instantly, making her laugh and ask if he's some kind of god before she tells him she just wants He kicks things off with a history lesson, explaining how archers used to be the MVPs of the battlefield, but since bows take forever to master and magic isn't great for massive group attacks, he breaks down why archers are actually a total nightmare to manage since they get tired way too fast and are useless in a real fight. So he's come up with a crazy new invention. He shows off his brand new weapon design, a mechanical bow built onto a wooden frame, and calls it a crossbow. He tells Claire this new weapon is a total game changer because even a kid could take down a knight with zero training, and her eyes go wide as she realizes all you have to do is point and pull the trigger to fire it. This thing is a total game changer because if they can actually mass produce it, even a tiny village could suddenly have the power of a whole army. She stops focusing on the weapon and starts thinking about the guy who made it, realizing that having this kind of knowledge makes him a massive target for the nobles. But the crazy part is he barely even read the blueprints and only managed to build one prototype he can't even fix. She stares him down, asking what he thinks she'll do with the proof, while he looks away looking totally stressed and asks if she's finally gonna. She cracks a tiny smile because, after checking the blueprints and hearing his plan, she knows this design is a total game changer that they can definitely mass produce if they put in the work. He's completely stunned by her words, so Mai makes him a crazy offer. She'll give him a full workshop with every tool and material he needs to be her personal blacksmith. But there, he listened as she dropped the deal. He'd be her land's first blacksmith, fixing the army's gear, but only if he spent time every day inventing crazy new weapons. So, he didn't even say a word, he just threw his hands up in pure excitement, and as Mai watched him go totally wild, she just asked him, "Listen up." She thought he was a total show-off, but he didn't seem like a bad guy, and she and another merc agreed that even though things were weird, everything was going great until Yuri suddenly jumped in and snatched No-En by his suspenders, looking totally annoyed as he demanded to know if No-En was actually trying to take his little sister. He didn't even flinch, but then the scene flips and he's standing right in front of a master craftsman who looks totally drained as he sizes him up and asks. He shook off his tired look and flashed a huge grin when the master agreed to make an exception for Damien, giving a big thumbs up and promising to look after him. While taking a break, Masters looks totally crushed and mumbles about wanting a wife, while Pence the mercenary overhears him finally hitting his limit. He gets even more annoyed when he spots Mai shyly handing Yuri a bento, and watching them act all cute just makes him feel super lonely, realizing that even though he finally has his own land, the only thing he's missing now is a wife. He turns to the big mercenary Radley and tells him they're both dealing with the exact same mess. Before Radley can even open his mouth, the mercenary in the fur collar makes a massive, flashy announcement that he's actually found a wife, leaving Radley totally speechless and blushing hard. The mercenary flashes 2 fingers to flex his win, while the master just stands there totally stunned. The master's jaw hits the floor as he loses it, yelling to know when this happened and who the secret partner is. Wiping away happy tears, the merc explains that he's always over at his buddies Rick and Dan's place for dinner, which is where Dan's sister Gina actually proposed to him. He whips around and points a finger right at the master, roasting him for being a total creep who looks down on everyone despite acting all tough. The master just hangs his head in shame since he can't even deny it, while the mercenary grumbles about how the guy will probably end up married before him anyway. The mercenary keeps talking, mentioning how even Yuri was just whining about wanting to get married, while the girl with the ribbon looks away totally flustered in the background. The conversation turns to Yuri finding a wife, and while she jokes that he must have been a total lady killer as a royal guard, Yuri looks away and admits he's seeing a girl from Retvik, which sounds like a total mess. She shuts that down fast, claiming they aren't even friends and there's definitely no romance going on between them. Yuri starts complaining that girls only care about his looks and his fancy job at the noble house, even though he's clearly bragging about how handsome he is. She gets a super serious look on her face and tells him she wants him to find a girl who loves him for who he really is, hoping they fall in love and stay together forever. She totally snaps, leaving the other mercs scratching their heads, until one guy grumbles that if she wants a sappy story, she should just go bother Bart, especially since another guy remembers Bart is getting married in just a month anyway. Pence walks off, thinking it's the perfect time to talk to Bart, but her thoughts are cut short when someone suddenly calls her name. She turns around to see the ribbon mercenary waving like a maniac, while a super annoyed Yuri stands right next to her, and the woman asks Pence if she's heard the tea about Bart since he's acting way too happy. Yuri totally blindsides his crew by announcing he's finally found his soulmate while working in Retvik this past month. And even though it's a crazy long story, he swears it. His friend starts bugging him about his type, so Yuri thinks for a second and says he likes nuns, which totally drives her crazy. Cut to a busy street where a lady in a fancy fur coat is walking alone, thinking about how easy it is to get played by sweet talk, and wondering if the wild rumors she heard are back with the mercenaries. Yuri admits he's looking for a partner he can vibe with for years, especially someone with huge goals, but then he gets hungry and tells the crew they need to find a spot to eat. He's ready to dig in as the waiter drops off the daily special, a piping hot bowl of. He stares at the stew looking totally unsure, but after one nervous bite, his eyes snap shut as he realizes he knows this flavor and immediately goes back for more. The lady serving him walks over to ask how the food is, and Yuri's totally shocked because the stew tastes exactly like the meals from back home. She asks if his home is a long way off, and he says it's super far, sounding totally sure he's never going back there again. On his way back, he starts thinking about his childhood as an orphan and the young nun he fell for who used to make him warm stew. He keeps replaying that painful memory of how she got sick from a deadly plague and finally passed away. Back in the present, one bite of this stew hits him with a wave of warmth and happiness he hasn't felt in a long time. Yuri's totally lost in his thoughts until the innkeeper suddenly bursts back in with her daughter, apologizing like crazy because she thinks she brought up bad memories, and it completely catches him. He gets all flustered and rubs his hair, telling her it's totally fine and to come back soon. But then he asks if she can make some stew that tastes just like. The innkeeper's face totally lights up with a huge, real smile, and she tells him she'd be stoked to help if it makes them feel a bit more at home. Yuri's inside the inn trying to get someone to listen to him, but Pence suddenly realizes that if he gets too comfortable, it's going to be a total In a memory, or maybe just a story, Pence grabs the hand of a shy girl in a hood among the roses and asks her straight up if she's in love with anyone right now. The hooded girl tries to deny it, but Pence just smiles and shouts that they're getting married. She's already proposed, got the dad's blessing, and even told no. Meanwhile, another guy is watching from the shadows and notices Bart's crew is finally having some fun with a girl who's got a lot of fight in her. So he decides to. Walking with Edgar, this guy is totally venting about how unfair life is, complaining that some dude just randomly got hitched to a sweet girl, and when Edgar asks for his take, his buddy is just. He lets out a tired sigh as they keep moving, but Edgar's got this sneaky little look on his face like he knows exactly what's up. That smirk of his stretches into a forced, painful-looking grin that's honestly enough to freak anyone out. Out of nowhere, the dark-haired guy grabs Edgar by his vest, his eyes wide with shock as he stammers, "Edgar, you can't be serious, right?" But Edgar just, it was all a total lie, and his head is absolutely spinning. If that was fake, then who's the real target? He stops dead as a crazy idea hits him, whispering to, everything finally clicks when he sees Edgar flirting with Anna from the shop, and he realizes she's the one his friend has been hiding this whole time. The prank was a total fail, and watching them now, it was obvious these two were actually crushing on each other. Edgar got all red-faced and told Anna he was super embarrassed Edgar noticed Radley slumped on the ground looking totally defeated, but he was confused because the big guy was actually radiating a crazy amount of pure joy. As everything started to burn, Radley knelt down and cried about how he honestly believed Edgar was actually getting married to. The confusion was finally over. And even though Radley and Bard had another girl picked out for Edgar, seeing him and Anna so hyped to be together made them realize they were meant for each other. When the group got back together, she laughed and told a super embarrassed Anna that the whole fiancé thing was just an act, while Pence cheered because their big trick actually worked. Everything was going perfectly. But later at a massive government building, the final decision was finally made. Inside the office, Lord Conan's 8 noticed Pence at her desk and mentioned she looked pretty down, but she brushed it off, saying she just felt a bit left out by her partner. She got this look of pure determination and realized she'd never find her own partner if things didn't change. So she suddenly declared she was taking charge and finding him a wife herself. The Lord's assistant was totally speechless and turned bright red, stuttering that there was no way he could accept such a crazy offer. He kept talking, saying that while lords usually set up marriages for their people, it felt super lame to rely on a younger guy like Lord Noan. Pence just asked if he was totally sure, which made him stop and actually think about her weird question. A new maid with long dark hair tells Noan she's finally done cleaning, so he gives her a big smile, calls her Rosetta, and tells her to go get some rest. He heads back to the office and asks Pence about the new girl. And Pence explains that since work was piling up, Matilda couldn't handle it all alone, so they hired 3 new maids, including. She gives him this super sneaky grin and asks if he's actually into Rosetta, making the poor aide totally freak out and tell her to stop because she's making him look super suspicious. Later, outside the massive mansion, he tells Matilda how peaceful it is and wishes this feeling could last forever, but she just stays totally silent. He's down, but way far away from this chill mansion. Things are getting crazy in a village right on the border of the Lancel and Lordeveld kingdoms, just south of B. Trouble is heating up as a gang of brutal raiders tears through the village, and their leader screams that absolutely nobody gets away. Not the kids, not the parents, and definitely not the elderly. They're acting like wild dogs. And as everything goes crazy, a terrified mom begs the attackers to stop while she protects her kids, but a bandit with an axe just snarls at us. He's totally gonna kill her, and the bandit leader, this scary dude with a massive scar over his eye, kneels next to a fallen villager, wondering why they had to. He finds the perfect target and gets dead serious, telling his crew of ex-mercenaries and bandits that they're done playing soldier and it's time to just raid the whole country. His voice echoes through the empty streets as he shouts the plan. Everyone rests today, but tomorrow they're grabbing supplies, burning the village to the ground, and heading north. Back in his office, Noan Alquist gets some seriously bad news. His right-hand man, Pence, tells him about a merchant who just came back from the west with a scary update. She goes on to say these bandits aren't just stealing stuff, they're actually wiping out entire villages and everyone in them. But Pence admits they still have 0 clues about who's running the fight. Yuri realizes these bandits have a smart leader who knows the land perfectly, and Bart agrees they're way more dangerous than some random gang, but then Pence drops the bombshell that the 10 pins. She shushes everyone and says the local lords have to clean up their own mess. But a gang of over 100 bandits is way too big for just one family to handle alone. Pence breaks down how the nobles are in a total mess, because if a lord can't handle their own problems, everyone thinks they're a joke, especially since mid-tier guys only have 100 soldiers, high-tier ones have 1,000, and low-tier nobles like those in Alquist's land don't even have an army. The kingdom is just sitting back while the local lords get picked apart, making Pence suspect a setup, especially since Mai points out that those southwest bandits are already pushing north. No one checks the map to see the bandits closing in on his Alquist lands in the northwest, then asks Pence for her expert take since she knows the defense is best. He figures the bandits probably don't know about the Belgrade Forest and wouldn't dare go inside, so his land in the northwest should be safe, but he still has a bad feeling he can hide. His face goes cold as he realizes his land is a total death trap. It's mostly empty, and those northern mountains mean there's no way out. So if an army attacks, they'll be forced into a brutal fight to the very last minute. He's finally made his choice and heads back to his mercs to tell them it's time to get ready, ordering Yuri, Pence, and Radley to start training the town. A soldier stares Matilda down with a stone-cold face while Lord Nolan asks his top aide for a massive favor back home, and Matilda silently swears she's got his back no matter what. She knew how bad this could get, and was low-key praying that all this prep work would end up being for nothing. She was worrying about the super shaky piece barely holding the Alquist East, Conan's Viscount C, and the Levitt territory together. Meanwhile, over at the Connaughts Viscount C, Lord Arnold was stressing over a report about bandits causing chaos on the borders, and when his aide reminded him that their northwest territory has always been stuck dealing with refugees and outlaws, the poor guy just let out a massive, exhausted sigh. He cringed, imagining a massive wave of refugees and bandits all swarming his land because they had absolutely nowhere else to run. Things were getting super tense with all these new people, and he knew if he messed up helping them, they'd just join the bandits and start causing total chaos since they had nowhere else to go. Knowing it was true made his face go dark as he looked out over his land, finally feeling the pressure of the massive threat. He started doing the math out loud, weighing his 10,000 citizens and 200 refugees against an army that was super rusty from years of peace. He realized that he spun away from the window, his brain working overtime to figure out how to crush those bandits without losing any men, and somehow turn the whole mess into a win for himself. His eyes lit up as he cooked up a plan, and his face went totally cold because he was ready to get serious. Resolve might have been just a follower, but she definitely wasn't down with this. She couldn't stop Lord Conan's crazy plan, but she wasn't about to let her. Meanwhile, the Viscount is moving pieces across a map, plotting his next big move. He's going to spread rumors that bandits are hitting the southern farms in Alquus to make it look like he's going to sandwich the bandits from the east and west to totally wipe them out, making it look like he saved the Alquist territory just to gain some massive political power. He knew that in a world where only results matter, this was the perfect move to protect his own skin, and he slammed his chess piece down to seal the deal. Meanwhile, in a wrecked village way down south, a bandit boss was standing over a wounded guy. Covered in blood and totally desperate, the villager begged for his life. He promised spitting out blood, the villager told them about a path heading north that goes right past a noble family's land. He explained that west of Conan's land sits the Alquist territory, a tiny place that just found a massive jewel mine, making it the perfect, easy target to hit for some quick cash. The villager explained that the northwest was a total dead end, blocked by the Connats, making the Alquist territory their only real way forward. The bandit leader's face went cold because he'd heard that exact same story at the last village he raided. Knowing it was a total lie, he asked the guy if he was really trying to send him on a full zip. He took out the villager without saying a single word, telling the guy to go on ahead while keeping his next move a total mystery. Standing in the middle of the wreckage, a new bandit boss slams his massive sword into the dirt and tells his crew that the Alquist resistance is officially over, joking that they've gotten so big the king is definitely going to notice them soon. He breaks down the whole plan. They're going to raid Alquist territory, snatch all the gold, split the loot, and then everyone can just go their separate ways to live however they want. The leader gives a cocky smirk and tells everyone this is their big shot to start over and finally live life to the max. Meanwhile, over at the estate, Anna slams the doors open and screams for Master Nohan, yelling that something totally awful just happened. Meanwhile, Christy hands a drink to a totally exhausted Edgar and tells him she just got word that a gang of southern bandits broke into Conan's territory and are charging straight for ER. Back at the estate, Konnitz's dark-haired subordinate is totally stunned to realize the bandits are charging west through their land toward Alquist territory, and she can tell something is seriously sketchy about. Her head is spinning trying to figure out why these bandits skipped every other village just to charge straight here. But then she remembers the Alquist Earldom noble territory is sitting right to the west. Back in the village, Edgar hears some wild rumors about a southern territory that's making bank from its mines, but has 0 soldiers to protect all that cash. With everyone totally wide open, a woman explains that some random merchant nobody knew was the one leaking the rumor. And even though she thought he was sketchy, he just kept selling his gear while Back in his office, Lord Konitz gets word that the bandits are pushing north, and he realizes only one noble would trick them into attacking Alquist territory. The person who knows exactly how weak their defenses really are. Meanwhile, as news of the invasion hits, Alquist's face twists into a dark, creepy smirk as he whispers to himself, finally realizing exactly what the Viscount is up to. Just like that, his smile vanishes and he's straight up livid, refusing to forgive them for messing with the Alquist domain. The perfect home he built for his people that he'll never. He turns to a young soldier named Bart to get the full story, asking her if she knows how big the bandit army is and when they'll strike. She reports that 100 enemies are. It's morning, and he's got a massive smirk on his face because he realizes he's just bought himself a huge head start. Half a day later, his right-hand man Bart is totally weirded out by how chill he's acting about the massive threat. After hearing the serious news, no one turns to his right-hand girl Matilda and tells her to get everyone together for a meeting, and she agrees without a second thought. Without wasting a second, the big bosses in charge of Alquist's army and government all gather together. Inside the main hall, the head of the long table is totally empty, but the whole council is gathered around it. Matilda, the Merc Squad with Yuri, Mai, Pence, and Rad. Then the soldier bard steps up and tells everyone they're definitely winning this, because they've got his golems and the home field advantage. He locks in with a scary look in his eyes and finally reveals their secret weapon, showing everyone that on top of everything else, they've still got a... He told his war council they had plenty of time to prep their secret weapon, and since the bandits were totally clueless, they had a massive advantage that would basically guarantee their victory. He's got the upper hand now, and with a sharp, cocky grin, he throws his arms wide and announces that it's finally time to start getting ready for war. Word spread like wildfire that bandits were attacking in just 12 hours, so everyone immediately started gearing up to defend their home. The whole village worked through the night, with the guys beefing up the wooden walls using massive logs while guards kept watch with torches, and inside, Yuri the mercenary and a soldier were busy going over there. While the village got ready and everyone knew I was coming, a bunch of scared women and kids crowded around Matilda to hear the report. She kept a totally straight face like a pro, but that one drop of sweat showed she was actually feeling the heat. She turns to Yuri and breaks down the escape plan, telling the women and kids to hide in the woods. But if the guys lose and the forest gets raided, they have to run for Viscount Connaught's territory, so she puts Mai in charge of the whole thing and she's totally down for it. Once I was gone, Yuri turned to his partner Michelle and asked if she was scared, making her jump just a little bit. She got super annoyed and snapped that she wasn't scared of some weak bandits since she's taken on pro mercenaries before, telling him to stop doubting her. But then she finally admitted that something else was actually eating at her. Her tough act totally fell apart as she finally admitted what was really scaring her. She was terrified that even if she and the baby made it out alive, she'd still lose him forever. He pulled her into a tight hug and promised he wasn't gonna die, swearing they'd all survive together while nobody even noticed them from the doorway. Freezing and desperate, she clung to Bart and sobbed that she couldn't live without him. So he held Michelle close and promised they'd be together forever while no one watched from the yacht. He watched another heartbreaking goodbye as Gina, with tears in her eyes, reached up to touch Radley's face just to get a good look at him before the big fight. While he could only whisper, "Next," we see the refugee leader Edgar holding a woman close, admitting that even though leaving his people behind was tough, he doesn't feel as guilty as the others because being with her is just second nature to him. He stood there watching them get all emotional and scared, and a drop of sweat rolled down his face because seeing all those raw feelings was totally freaking him out. Meanwhile, under those same stars, a lonely wooden tower stood all by itself against the creeping darkness. Suddenly, a young maid named Rosetta pops her head out from below with a big grin, calling out for a guy named Pint. She climbs the ladder to the watchtower and runs right into a grumpy guard who recognizes her as Rosetta. He starts grilling her, asking if she's just there to be a pain and telling her this is no place for a girl, but she doesn't look bothered at all. She flashed a super bright smile and held up her basket, explaining she knew Pence was on guard duty and brought some tea to liven things up. He was totally shocked she'd carry all that food just for him, and while he watched her in surprise, Rosetta set the basket down on the wooden platform. He turned to her on the platform, noticing she looked as calm as ever, and asked if she was actually scared of the bandits. But she just smiled and admitted that pretending to be brave would be... She finally told the truth, explaining that bandits destroyed her home and made her a refugee. So now, she's ready to fight for the one place that actually took her in. She squeezes her eyes shut as panic hits her hard, because just when she finally felt safe, she's back to worrying all over again. Meanwhile, Edgar's friend reveals the dark truth. Bandits eat their own food, raid villages to create refugees, and then hunt those same people down. It's a total nightmare, but meanwhile, back at the mansion, he's staring at a mountain of paperwork, looking totally drained while he finishes his final will. He's making sure that if he dies, everything's ready, and the young lord is so exhausted he's passed out right in Matilda's lap. But when Michelle walks in to give her report, she sees them and she catches on fast and sees he's completely wiped out. So even though she's there with a huge update that they're ready to move, she tells Matilda to just let him keep rest. Matilda's face softens as she watches Noon sleep, realizing he looks so vulnerable for a kid who's only 16. It's honestly sad that someone his age has to carry such a massive burden on his shoulders. She thinks back to how Nolan was totally harmless just a year ago, but now he's about to throw down with a gang of bandits to save himself and everyone he protects. She tells Michelle that his life has changed way too much, and the weight he's carrying is just too heavy for anyone. She knows she can't take his place no matter what, so she leans in and whispers. Murmurs finally makes her choice, leaning down to hug the sleeping Nolan and swearing to have his back with everything she's got. Michelle watches them with a smirk, telling Matilda that the only reason Lord Knowing can handle all that pressure is because she's right there by his side. As the sun starts rising over the land, a young girl soldier wakes up and stretches while the morning light hits everything outside. Back at the mansion, she quickly throws on her dark uniform and cloak as Christy and Rosetta check in to see how she slept, with a super refreshed Christy saying her head feels totally fine. The soldier stands before her squad, the bald guy Michelle, and the dude in the vest, telling them she's feeling 100% and they've finished all the prep just in time. So seeing their serious faces, she asks if they're finally ready to go. She flashes a wild, cocky grin and shouts that it's time to give these bandits a warm welcome. Welcome back. While that's going on, the mercenary leader Yuri scouts a village path and sees only 31 people live there, with even fewer ready to fight. But they clearly know he. Standing at the gate, he rubs his chin and realizes that even though they can't sneak in anymore, the defenses are so weak, just one tower and some junk, that they can easily see. Yuri flashes a sharp smirk, rests his sword on his shoulder, and yells out orders to his crew. "Follow me!" he shouts, as a massive wave of mercenaries charges ahead, and now he's finally ready to break down the mission for everyone. Back with the defenders, a soldier points to a map and breaks down her plan, explaining that since the bandits have to go through Bezelgrave Forest, they're stuck on one path in there. Yuri stands in front of the Grand Mansion, remembering the intel about a village past the forest that grew crazy fast over the last 6 years and brought in slaves recently, so he knows the Lord will protect this huge prize at all costs, while he wonders what kind of defense they're planning. He leads his 200 guys through the forest, but they run right into a giant stone golem with one creepy glowing eye blocking the way. Suddenly, a crazy bright light explodes from the trees, and the guys have to cover their eyes in total shock. While they were still confused, the golems charged in and smashed the bandits aside like they were nothing, leaving the second-in-command screaming in shock and wondering what kind of monster he. Suddenly, a girl in a dark uniform stepped out of the shadows with a glowing magic seal on her hand, and when Yuri called her a sorcerer, she didn't even hide it. She bolted for the village gate, yelling to 2 beastkin girls that she was heading out and that she was counting on them to handle their part of the plan. She hopped on her radio to tell Commander Bart that Yuri's squad was going to ignore the golem and charge the village, so she and Matilda would lure them to the trap before falling back to the ice. She scrambled to the top of the wooden wall, looked down at the bandits rushing in, and signaled the crossbows to fire. She gave the signal, and a massive wave of bolts rained down on the clueless bandits, leaving the guy with the eye patch totally stunned as he shouted, Wait, what's going on?" Right as the trap hits, this super angry knight in armor shows up next to her and screams that he'll never forgive anyone for breaking into his land. The scene at the wooden wall is a total nightmare, with arrows and blood everywhere you look. An old man asks Mai if this is really all that's left of the village, and looking, just before the big fight, Damien puts on his goggles and shows off a sick new crossbow to Mai, asking if she's serious about making a ton of them. And Mai, who's hanging out with Matilda and Michelle, says totally, because he finally finished the perfect prototype she asked for. He starts bragging about how the gun is super light, crazy accurate, and can handle a ton of firing without breaking, making it the perfect weapon for anyone who's never even held a gun before. She locks eyes with him and asks why they'd even bother making hundreds of these crossbows, arguing that these weapons are exactly what the people need to finally protect themselves and survive. Yuri stands in front of a target he just shredded with bolts and turns back with a cocky smirk, saying, "Of course," because he knows this weapon is a total beast. Now that the pro says they're legit, Mai turns back to Damien and thinks about ordering 20 of those crossbows to start with. She flips her decision with a massive, confident grin and demands 50 mass-produced units, totally sure that's enough to keep their home safe from any danger. That command pays off big time as a massive wave of bolts blasts from the wall, totally wiping out the bandits in seconds. Damien is totally hyped behind the wall because his invention is actually working, but he screams at the others to stay focused so they don't get blasted. Once the shooting stops, a teammate helps Damien catch his breath and warns him they're in huge trouble if the enemy starts aiming for their feet, and Damien knows he's right. Looking at the pile of bodies after that crossbow blast, the bandit boss realizes the only ones left are his last few guys and one massive, scary golem. He kneels next to his dying teammate and coldly plans to use the bodies as human shields. His whole strategy goes out the window when the golem smashes another soldier, and he screams at the top of his lungs for everyone to run away from that monster. The bandit leader makes a desperate move, lunging forward to snatch Damien and lock him in a brutal chokehold. With the hostage locked down, the crew asks for the plan, and their leader, all bloodied up but still standing tall, shouts that they've come too far to quit, so it's time to smash through that gate. He grips even tighter as he realizes with total horror that this is only the first goal, while Damien grunts and struggles to break free. While the standoff is heating up, backup finally arrives, and she moves like a total ghost through the bandits, slicing them all down with insane speed. Another soldier jumps into the fight and blocks a strike with her sword, while down below, little Christy is secretly charging up a massive spell with her hands glowing bright. The spell finishes and power surges into the golem, making its eye glow with a scary light right before it absolutely crushes a bandit's head. Now that it's gone totally berserk, the golem turns its rage on the rest of the bandits, smashing and tearing right through them. The monster just kept tearing through them like a stone hurricane, shredding the bandits while their leader roared in total panic, gripping his sword and screaming for a way out. But as his crew dropped, he tried to ditch his old life and start fresh where no one knew him. But it was all for nothing because now fate is punishing him and ripping away every bit of happiness he found. That realization made him totally snap, his face twisting in pure rage as he grit his teeth, sweating with fury because everything he worked for was being ripped away from him all over again. Damien. He glared at Damien with pure rage. He decided that even if they were all doomed, he wasn't going down without a fight. He screamed that it was all Damien's fault. He lunged forward, his face twisting as power exploded through him, and Christie immediately knew he was using body-strengthening magic as the bandit leader swung his sword down, glowing with a terrifying aura and promising to end them. Just as the sword was about to hit, a new fighter crashed the party. A girl with bunny ears appeared out of nowhere and landed a massive kick that sent the bandit leader flying back. He stumbles back and she doesn't give him a second to breathe, shouting that he's going to regret ever crossing them as she lunges forward to land a massive hit. She charged again, zooming right past the bandit to pull Christie into a tight hug and shouting that fighting by her side was the only thing that truly made her happy. The bandit boss just stood there bleeding and totally shocked by what he was seeing. Her words hit him right in the feels and made him remember his old mercenary squad. He thought back to when that memory gets totally smashed when his old bald commander suddenly appears and blasts him with a brutal kick to the head, sending blood flying everywhere. He flies through the air and his boot slams home with a nasty crunch, sending blood spraying everywhere. With the bandit boss finally down, a girl stepped up and told the rest of the thugs to surrender or die, while a soldier nearby rushed to give the mercenary leader the play-by-play. While Bart stood over the body of his old subordinate, Yuri asked Mai if she knew the guy, and she confirmed he was the leader of a mercenary group they hired years ago. I told Bart he didn't look this scary back then, and he admitted that his face had totally changed. Looking around at the scene, Bart realized they were actually super lucky to have met Lord. Lord Knowing wasn't the only one feeling this way, and somewhere else, one of his soldiers was looking super serious about everything that just went down. She rushed to find Lord Noah with a serious look, shouting that she had urgent news about Bart and the road patrol. Noah asked if it was more bandits, but she told him that wasn't. The soldier told her that a group of knights in heavy armor were caught spying on the village before they took off, and she realized right away they were definitely Viscount Cone's men. A few days later, things were getting seriously intense inside Viscount Konnitz's territory. Things were getting super intense, and it was all because of the way the Lord was acting. Viscount Konnitz is sitting there with his hands gripped tight, looking totally stressed and frustrated as he wonders how everything turned into such a massive mess. He remembers the early reports saying the bandits weren't even coming for his land, but were actually targeting the Alquist domain, so he sent scouts to go check it out. The scouts finally confirmed the bandits were raiding Alquist's land, and Konnitz saw his perfect chance to strike, so he immediately sent his army out to hunt them down. They're coming in from the back, and while he knows his troops are annoyed about the sudden rush, he figures staying alive is worth the complaining, especially since he's only pretending to save the fee. He's just sitting there being all moody when a girl in a uniform interrupts him with a huge, smug smile. She acts like they're old buddies, but the second she mentions Lord Alquist, inside a massive, sun-drenched room, things are getting super awkward as Lord Noah and Alquist chill on a sofa making magic bubbles, while Viscount Arnold sips his tea with a stone cold. He notices no one hasn't even touched his drink and looks totally on guard. And no one knows he can't risk a single sip, so he tries to change the subject, while the Viscount catches. Right then, one of Conan's subordinates with short dark hair walks in looking way too happy. The Viscount starts hyping her up for a job well done, but she shuts him down. No one finally puts the pieces together and realizes Konitz actually invited those bandits in as a messed up way to protect his people, making him seriously question what kind of guy the Viscount really is. The Viscount is totally floored when he realizes no one actually planned for the bandits to show up, and that subordinate's smug grin proves he's being judged and needs to move right now. He's getting even more nervous as he looks at the group because Viscount Alquist is actually there, and the warriors behind him aren't even trying to hide that they're ready to kill. He's trying to figure out where all this insane rage is coming from, and he's starting to get a seriously bad feeling about what's about to go down. The Viscount snaps and jumps to his feet, turning straight toward Nolan to settle things once and for all. He shuts everyone down with a wicked grin, bragging that not a single one of his people died thanks to the insane new gear his blacksmiths made, and as he orders a massive mercenary in a fur collar, The merc does what he's told and tosses that massive bag over his shoulder like it's nothing, leaving the Viscount's aide totally stunned as he walks past. The mercenary slams the heavy bag onto the floor with a massive thud, making Lord Conan's two assistants jump back in total shock. Count Conades stays totally chill and tells his guys to put their swords away, saying that even though he's fuming, this isn't the place for a fight, so he lets the mercenary keep going because he's sure he can handle whatever happens. A pulls out a high-tech crossbow, and Konitz realizes it's basically a cheat code that lets even the weakest, most unskilled person fight like a pro. The man himself explains that even though his land is tiny, these weapons make his small army hit like a truck, and he only won because he used his golems to mass produce. We see his golems absolutely wrecking the bandits, overwhelming them with a non-stop storm of crossbow arrows. Back in the present, he's got this crazy confident look while shushing everyone, saying that an army of 200 men isn't even a threat to them. Hearing the number 200 hits Lord Connix like a punch to the gut, and he turns pale as a ghost, realizing his secret bandit army isn't a secret anymore. Nobody's saying it out loud, but that number is actually the size of his massive new army. And it's all official thanks to the Alka family crest on that battle stand. Konitz suddenly realizes something terrifying. Even if he forced every single person in his kingdom to fight, he still wouldn't stand a chance. And seeing no one standing on a mountain of bodies proves that, finally, no one drops the ultimate flex by revealing that not a single person in his land died during the last war. And with a terrifying grin, he asks the Viscount exactly how much destruction he thinks. He explained that the second Konitz built up his army, Alquist had to treat him like a massive threat, but now he's just smirking because Konitz's big power. He basically said he had to play hardball from the jump because he's just too powerful now. And he knew Konitz would have done the exact same thing if the roles were flipped, since fighting a losing battle is a total waste of time. He finished his roast by leaning in and mocking the Viscount for turning pale, leaving the guys sweating buckets and totally speechless. A magic seal glowed on his hand as he made it clear that his insane power was just the start. And now he's calling the shots to make sure the Alquist territory gets exactly what it needs. Lord Conan let out a heavy sigh from across the room, totally admitting he was beaten, and asked his guys how they could get on Lord Alquist's good side so he'd actually accept their surrender. But his subordinate Render jumped in and totally roasted him, calling it super weak that he admitted he was wrong so fast, making the Viscount flinch back like a big bear. She brushed off the embarrassment and flashed a smile, telling him right then and there that her boss had a favor to ask, leaving the Viscount totally stunned by the sudden move. Then it's her turn, and with a super creepy smile, she points a finger and reveals she's actually an intermediate. The middleman starts spilling the tea on the local power struggle, explaining how Lord Berg's nobles formed a massive squad while the northern elites from the House of Connors are getting ready to jump into the mix. She finished her pitch with a total curveball, asking Lord Konitz to get her into that elite inner circle, leaving the Viscount looking completely stunned and confused. She explained that the kingdom is a huge mix where noble families from the northwest, northeast, central, southwest, and southeast all run their own separate squads, but still team up because they absolutely have to. Joining one of these groups gives you a massive boost in power and money, so you'll always have backup if another noble family tries to mess with. Getting in is actually super hard, because these groups are strictly for high-ranking nobles and barons, while the lower-class guys are just used as middlemen. She explained that low-rank nobles need tons of land and cash to join, but they also need a powerful noble to back them up. Since they just took down those bandits, it was the PG. She admitted her family, the Tsuchimikado house, is at the very bottom of the noble ranks and still pretty weak, so she joined the Northwestern Kingdom to get the protection she needs to level up. She flashed a confident smirk and asked him to team up, swearing she'd never tell a soul about his secret plans. Nobody else even thought of her plan, but since it was a total win-win for both of them, he shook her hand and promised to introduce her to the Northwestern Lordberg nobles using her real name. Fast forward 1 month, to the middle of December, where a carriage is cruising through the countryside just as the Northwestern Kingdom's massive social season kicks off at the Bechtel Shaimar Kayate for everyone to swap gossip and team up. Tsuchimikado stared out the window of her borrowed carriage as they pulled up to the massive Bechtel Shaimar estate in the capital. Thinking this huge noble party was the perfect place to finally, snow was falling outside, and inside the mansion, a massive ballroom was glowing and ready for the big noble party. After they arrive, they head down a long hallway where Lord Connate asks Noan if he's nervous, and since it's Noan's first big party, he admits while the guy chats with the Lord, Matilda whispers to Tsuchimikato, asking if she's really okay with Noan's slave doing the intros, but Tsuchimik No one is all on his own. And as the group reaches these massive double doors, Lord Konitz just looks back and tells him to do his best right before the doors fly open to reveal a super bright ball. They stepped into the massive hall, and the whole place was already buzzing with a ton of nobles talking their heads off. They looked incredible in their fancy gear, and the second they walked in, a bunch of noble guys across the room turned around to stare right at the newcomers. The second the new guys walked in, everyone started whispering and staring them down, totally curious about who these people were. With a look of pure disgust, Lord Konitz ignored the whispering crowd and told Tsuchimikato to go greet the Marquis of Bechtelsheim first, and she just said, before she can even move, a young noble in a sharp uniform jumps out and blocks their path, sneering that they should know their place as he introduces himself as Marquis Edmund Marshall and asks why they. Instead of backing down, Tsuchimikato just stares him down and says she's not going to stop being rude, making Lord Konitz absolutely lose it as the tension in the room. Everyone was totally speechless. And as the Marquis stood there frozen by her boldness, the sharp click of a heel cut through the air as no one stepped right between the noble and Tsuchi. Right as things were getting crazy, this scary noble in a dark coat showed up and killed the vibe, demanding to know what was going on while Tsuchimikato just stood there totally shocked.